Welcome back to the channel. This is Trinity Storm and you are watching 7th part of What If Naruto Became Curse of Hatred. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share and subscribe to the channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
In Konoha, the usual dark gray clouds were hanging over the world like a gargoyle, ready to attack sinners. The clouds created a darkness that covered the village, not like the soft embrace of sleep or a woman, but like being locked up in a metal hole or coffin and screaming and scratching to get out. The village was in the same mood it always is when the weather is like this. Every soul was filled with darkness and gloom. People walking down the street had small frowns on their faces and were scared of the worst as water droplets painted the ground. People and citizens were getting ready to run away from the coming rain, finding shelter where they could and warm food when they could. The people wondered over and over again why Konoha, a place that used to be sunny and warm, was now so cold and upset, as if all of its life had been taken away in an instant. No one came up with a clear answer, but they often accepted that things were beyond their control. Though there were things that no one could accept, they couldn't accept things that were out of their control, even if their hearts told them they were wrong. Sakura Haruno was packing her things to leave the village and go to the capital of the Land of Fire with the politician Inze Hosoku. Inze was a man of many talents and surprises, and he had come to Konoha to talk to Tsunade right away about a number of issues, including one daimyo's lack of competence. Inze had been kind enough to let Sakura stay at his mansion, where all of her wants and needs could be met. She was packing all of her things for the trip. What she had to do was already clear to her. She was a delegate for Konoha in the voice of her village to the Hokage. Sakura was honestly a little scared because she didn't know what to do. She certainly didn't expect to be Konoha's delegate. Couldn't Shikamaru do this? He'll just be too lazy and a pain, so no. She thought about the types of people she would meet, but she put those thoughts to the back of her mind because she knew exactly who she was going to meet: pretentious nobles who cared more about the dirt on their shoes than the people they ruled. That way of life, in Sakura's opinion, was disgusting and wasteful. But maybe there were other people like Inze in the courts of the Land of Fire. The ones who cared more about other people's well-being than their own, just good-hearted people. They care about the safety and security of their country and the people who live there. There was a knock on her door, and she let the person in. When the door opened, a young man with a square face and narrow, slightly rounded eyes walked in. He had spiky, caramel brown hair that reached his chin, eyes that were a sandy brown color, and skin that looked like marble. He wore a white kimono with a black trim around the edges that was tied around his waist with an obi. The black trim had wavy mist patterns on it, and the sleeves were loose enough that his hands were hidden by them. She smiled a little when she saw her new friend Inze, who was taking her to the capital. "If you look out her window at the dark gray clouds flying over the village," Inze said with a small pout, "good morning or good afternoon. You can't really tell with this weather." He meant it. That's why clocks were everyone's best friend in the village and no one went anywhere without one. The handsome politician asked, "Are you almost ready to leave?" Sakura just nodded at him with a small smile on her face and a sense of excitement radiating from her. "I just need to make sure we have enough supplies for our ninja and finish some work at the hospital. Then we can leave, hopefully soon," Sakura said with a smile, and Inze nodded. "Well, when you're ready, meet me at the northern gate, and we'll go to the capital. There'll be a carriage waiting for you, you'll know it when you see it," Inze said as he left the room. Sakura watched the door close and then went back to packing her things. Tenten had taught her basic fuinjutsu. She wasn't a master, she didn't even think of herself as an expert, but it was enough to get by. She knew the amazing things that could be done with fuinjutsu, but she wasn't ready to try them. As Sakura packed the last of her clothes, she looked over at a picture on a small shelf and smiled at the people in it. She took the picture, smiled a little more, and ran her finger across the face with the whiskers and golden sun hair. This was the only picture she had of him, and she couldn't give it up. About Naruto. She loved the picture more than anything else and thought it was her most valuable possession. She knew she had everything she needed, from tools and books to her vanity items, as she put the picture in a random ceiling scroll. As she listened, she recognized the sound of tapping as not coming from the rain in Konoha, but from somewhere else. When she looked out her window, she saw an Anbu member wearing a bird mask looking in. As the Anbu disappeared from view, it said, "Hokage Sama wishes to speak with you." Sakura raised an eyebrow in interest. Whenever Tsunade called her, it was always important, whether it was for the village, the shinobi, or her own safety. Sakura quickly put her scrolls in a bag and walked out the window. She didn't bother to say goodbye to her parents because she wasn't going home that day and needed to get away from them because they were too much for her. She walked through the halls with small drops of water on her clothes when she got to the Hokage's tower. When she knocked on the door, Tsunade let her in. When she turned around, she saw her teacher with her back to her, staring out over the village as it started to rain, drowning the village with the cloud's tears. Sakura couldn't see it, but Tsunade had a serious face and eyes that looked almost dead. A soft voice said, "You wanted to see me, Tsuade." Sama. Her teacher didn't move or turn to face her. She couldn't take her eyes off of the village she was in charge of. She looked at every drop of rain and watched as people ran around looking for shelter from the sad tears. As Sakura sat down in her office chair, Tsunade turned to face her. "I've been wanting to talk to you about something, but I've been on the fence about it. Since you're going to the capital, I thought it would be best to tell you now, before everyone else finds out," she said. Sakura asked, "And this is about?" Because she really didn't understand what her leader was talking about. Tsuade spoke in a solemn tone, "Naruto. And his heritage." Sakura looked at her teacher with wide eyes and never took her emerald eyes off of her honey brown ones. "When my grandfather was still in power, he married the princess of the Uzumaki, Mito Uzumaki, to strengthen bonds between our clans and because they genuinely loved each other. During their prosperous and happy life together they had 2 children. A son and a daughter. Their son was my father. While their daughter traveled to Uzushiogakure, Umi Senju felt more of a greater connection to the Uzumaki than the Senju, and she wished to rejoin her people and to learn of Fuinjutsu from the greatest masters in the world, and because of her bright red hair she was accepted without any qualms. She later married a man from the Uzumaki, a distant relative where the bloodline was diluted enough. They had 1 child together. A daughter. Her name was Kushina Uzumaki. She gasped and said, "Tsunade. Sama, you're not saying." Kushina later came to Konoha to be a shinobi of the village, where she married the man who would later become the Yondaime Hokage, and together, they had 1 child. A son. Tsunade spoke, her eyes filled with sorrow. When Kushina moved to the village, Tsunade welcomed her with open arms, and the 2 were more like sisters than cousins. After Tsunade left the village, she kept in touch with her cousin through letters they sent every month. The last letter she got was 1 month before the Kyuubi attack, and it told Tsunade all about Kushina's pregnancy, including what she thought her child would be like, while the blonde woman thought she was not until afterward. A few months after the attack, Tsunade found out that the child had lived. He or she was now known as Uzumaki and had most of Minato's features. From her ocean blue eyes to her golden hair, her face looked like a huge neon light. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze is the great-grandson of the Shoden Hokage, through Hashirama's daughter, Naruto's maternal grandmother. Naruto was basically a prince in his own village. He was from the Shoden family, who started the village, and was a member of the Senju clan, which was one of the founding clans and the most powerful, feared, and respected clan in the world. He was treated like a plague and was seen as dirt on the ground, with fear that was only found around death and pain. A tear ran down Sakura's cheek as she thought about the news. She thought that humans were some of the cruelest animals in the world, since only animals could treat each other so badly. Sakura said, "And you let him suffer here alone, when you could have made him happy and given him a family to love." Her voice was tense with anger. Tsunade bowed her head a little in shame and tried not to think of another mistake she had made in her bad life. "You're just as shameful as the villagers," Sakura yelled at her teacher. She turned around and walked out the door without giving her any attention because she didn't think she deserved it. Why were Jiraiya and Tsunade the ones who let the people they loved suffer the most when it came to family? It was just not forgivable. Except for a few people, Sakura had never felt so disgusted toward someone. Jiraiya and Tsunade could have at least gone to see Naruto and shown him that there were people who loved and cared for him. This would have shown him that he wasn't alone in his life and given him something to be happy about. Things that seem so simple can sometimes hurt someone the most. While Sakura stood there, Tsunade did nothing but look at the empty space. Her apprentice told her everything that was true, and she couldn't lie about it. She let Naruto suffer like a sheep in a wolf den, helpless, by himself, and in pain. She was too focused on how bad her own life was that she made someone else's life worse by accident. Jiraiya was the same. He was away for good reasons. He was after Orochimaru and keeping an eye on the Akatsuki, but he could have at least stopped by to see the golden blonde. The last son of the Senju clan was left to die by her. Things might have been different if she had kept him in that program. In the village, Sakura was at the supply depot, where Konoha took care of all the tools, weapons, storage, and other things that the ninjas of the village needed to do their jobs. This was one of the pink-haired kunoichi's jobs, even though it was boring. She quickly grabbed a clipboard that had a list of everything that was in the building. She was too busy with her work and trying not to show how mad she was at her teacher. She just wanted the day to end so she could go to the Fire Country capital with Inze. Talking about her feelings didn't help her, so she tried to hold back any anger she was feeling and control any violent tendencies she got from Tsunade. If she lost control, she might have destroyed the building and a few others. But she just wanted to be alone. The girl with pink hair said, "Okay, 30 hip pouches for the Anbu, and I'm done," but she knew something wasn't right. She picked up the hip pouch that was a little off from the rest and asked, "Huh? 31. Where did that come from?" Sakura put the hip pouch next to the others because she didn't think it was important. Soon after, a group from the Anbu came by and took the hip pouches to the Anbu headquarters. When the bags got there and no one was around, the silent shadow had reached the next step in its plan. As Sakura sat in the dark and silent storeroom, the next phase began. The stray pouch she had picked up started to move. The hip pouch's zipper opened, and a thin, flexible leg with black leather armor on it popped out and landed firmly on the ground. Another leg with the same black leather armor then appeared, and so on until the whole body was revealed. The person wore a black bodysuit that covered their whole body and had dark gray square-shaped patterns on the arms and chest. They also wore silver leather armor that covered their front torso, went down to their legs, and protected their back. This armor was held together by bands on their sides in a ring-shaped band that connected it to their neck. Finally, they wore long boots with white lines that went up to their waist and stuck snugly to their body, held together by two bands around their waist. The person was a woman who looked to be in her mid to late teens, even though her body made her look older. She had pale skin and long, lavender hair that fell behind her shoulders and was partially tied up in the back in a long bun. A strand of hair fell between her eyes, which had milky white irises and pupils. A blue star-shaped hair clip split her hair to the left side of her head. She looked like something had fallen from the sky as a whole. She reached back into her hip pouch and took out a pair of sai, which are weapons that someone had made for her. She then put them on her sides. After that, she left the room without turning her head. She didn't pay any attention to anything as she walked around the Anbu headquarters. Her pale eyes never moved and her steps never made a sound. Her only goal was to get to the lower levels of the headquarters. She turned around the next corner and went through the doors of an elevator, but she had trouble figuring out which button to press to make it go down. She was frustrated that she couldn't figure out which button to press, and it wasn't until she scraped her finger against each one that she realized where she was going and ran straight to root headquarters. When she got to headquarters and got out of the elevator, she didn't look around or care about what was going on around her. She kept going toward her target while the hidden root agents in the area watched her through their eyeholes. One of them then went to tell his boss what she was doing. Danzo Shimura, the shinobi no Yami, Darkness of the Shinobi, was sitting in the dark in his room with only one candle for light.
He was sipping tea and enjoying the taste and smell of it.
His only eye was squinted shut, and his body was stiff and ready to attack at any moment. He was thinking about Tekurufu, a man who had been irritating him for far too long, and wondered if the man would return. Danzo needed the man to stay alive because he needed his tricky mind to find something. Danzo didn't like to waste a good opportunity, so Tekurufu would bow to him again. While Danzo was thinking, one of his agents walked up to him and whispered something in his ear. This piqued his interest, but he couldn't say anything else before the agent left. Danzo thought to himself, so she has returned. It was only a matter of time. He took another sip of his tea and then pulled out a decorated box from his desk. The old shinobi opened it, revealing a red velvet cloth and a golden decorated control device that looked like a lighter with a red button on top. The girl with lavender hair knew that Danzo's dogs were following her as she walked through the root headquarters. She could smell their stink from a mile away, which was strange because Root was known for keeping things secret. She could also smell the shinobi following her. As she walked down a hallway, 2 Root members appeared out of nowhere and got ready to face her. She didn't stop, even though the 2 shinobi in front of her were a threat, and she kept walking quickly forward. She sped up and ran at the Root agents, who were standing their ground. One of them tried to punch her, but she dove under it and slid across the ground past the agent, where she threw a sealing tag that landed close to the Root agent. A second later, the seal was broken, and lightning struck the Root agent, knocking him out from the electric currents running through his body. She rushed at the other agent without wasting any time. She jumped in the air, flipped forward, and landed on the Root agent, kicking him in the face so hard that his mask broke and he passed out. She stood up straight with her foot still on the shinobi's face and started walking again. The 2 agents were left where they were. When another Root agent came around a corner, she sprinted at them and slid across the ground, breaking the Root agent's knees as she went. She kept sliding until she was behind the agent and fell into a predatory stance just in time for her to feel another agent rush around a corner. She jumped to her feet and jumped over the downed Root agent with the broken knee, using him as a springboard. She then locked her legs around the neck of the coming agent and threw him to the ground headfirst, knocking him out. Then she flipped in the air and hit the Root soldier with a broken leg in the head with an axe kick, knocking him out. As she walked toward her goal, she soon felt the presence of 2 more agents around the corner. She took 2 pellets out of her armor and threw them around the corner in front of the coming agents. The pellets exploded in their faces, shocking them and making their ears ring. As she slid across the ground again, she knocked one of the agents off his feet and punched him in the face when he hit the ground, knocking him out. She then turned to the other agent, put her foot on his front leg, used it as a springboard, and backflipped in the air, kicking him in the face and knocking him out. He landed on his back with a loud impact. When she felt 4 more agents coming at her from behind, she turned around and rushed at them. The first agent charged at her and tried to punch her, but she dove under his punch and hit him in the gut, making him cough a little. He then took another punch to the chin, which stunned him, and an arm was wrapped around his head to hold him there. The second agent charged at her, but she kicked him in the knee, breaking it. He fell to the ground with only one knee to support himself, where he was kicked in the chin, just like the first agent. He felt her 2 feet around his neck, and she flipped them over quickly and hard, hitting them headfirst on the ground and rendering them unconscious. A third Root agent pulled out a kunai to defend himself and scare the lavender-haired girl, but it didn't work. She blocked his hand with her own, stopping the slash. She then grabbed her attacker's hand and pulled him to the ground on his knees. He got back up after being punched in the face with a palm strike, but it didn't last long as he was kicked in the knee, breaking it on impact and falling to the ground. Even though the last agent came charging at her, she was ready for him. The Root tried to kick her in the face, but she grabbed his foot and kicked it, knocking him off balance. She then kneed him in the place where the sun doesn't shine. The agent wouldn't be getting up anytime soon if that didn't knock him out. She then felt another agent coming up behind her. She charged at the shinobi, who barely had time to react because she was moving so quickly. She slid to the ground and kicked at his foot, knocking him out. The ninja lost his balance and fell to the ground, where he saw a foot land firmly in his face. After that, Shen began walking quickly again. A few minutes later, she ran into more resistance in the form of 3 soldiers. When she put her hands together, ninja wire appeared between her fingers, and she held the tough as steel wire while blocking a kunai attack from another agent. She then kicked the shinobi in the stomach, which knocked him out. She continued by punching him in the face and then in the stomach again. She then turned around and wrapped the wire around the ninja's neck, starting to choke him while holding the wire in her left hand only. Another agent tried to punch her, but she ducked just in time, and he unprofessionally fell to the ground. She then raised her right arm to block a punch from another Root agent, and quickly tied the wire around his hand. She then stomped her knee on his bound arm, sending the agent and the person who was trying to catch their breath from the wire around his neck plummeting to the ground. She then punched the man with the bound hand, knocking him out while the other agent was. After his first attack failed, the person who was picking himself up stood up to start his second attack. The girl with the milky eyes, on the other hand, jumped at him out of nowhere and wrapped her legs around his neck, choking and stunning him. She then put her feet on the ground and threw him over her shoulder, landing headfirst on the ground. Another agent came around the corner and tried to stab her in the back, but she blocked his arm and put him in an armlock, which made him scream in pain. He then brought his arm up again out of the lock and into close quarters, where she elbowed him in the face, knocking him down, and then roundhouse kicked him in the back of the head. She got back on her feet and walked toward her destination, leaving a trail of still bodies behind her. She didn't even break a sweat. As another agent came around the corner, she pulled out a canister from her armor and sprayed him in the face with pepper spray. He wasn't wearing a mask, though. She then made her way through route headquarters. When she finally got to the right spot in the headquarters, she could feel her target on the other side, standing still and waiting for her. She had been waiting a long time for this. To find out the truth and get her answers. Danzo was drinking his tea when he noticed that his sliding doors were beginning to freeze in frost. When he breathed, he could see his breath as clearly as if it were a light in his face. The sliding doors kept freezing, cracking, and becoming covered in ice. Always one of his best, she was. Before long, the solid water covered the whole door. In an instant, it broke into a million pieces that fell to the ground. But on the other hand, he could see the woman who did it. As she stood there, her milky white eyes looking right at him and her twin sigh ready to attack, he could tell that the sudden drop in temperature didn't bother her at all. If anything, it made her feel stronger and more enlightened. Then she carefully walked toward the old shinobi, who was not scared of her and just stared at her with his eyes squinted. "I think I need a new door," Danzo said with his careful tongue. The woman stopped in her tracks as she stood in front of him. They were at a good distance to talk, not too close, not too far. "And murder. Still, I believed it was only a matter of time before you came skulking back here." Tetsuneko. The man in front of Tetsuneko was met with disgust on her face as she said, "That's not my name, it never was. And I'm not quite as dead as you thought, and a new door won't be the only thing you'll need in a moment." Danzo spoke in a condescending way, making the woman named Kiyoko grit her teeth at the old badger. "Oh, yes, I heard you have a new name. The one he gave you. Kiyoko, was it? I can't seem to remember." Kiyoko pointed one of her sai at the route commander and said, "You sent him to his death. Just like all of your tools, that were no longer useful. Just like me." The commander almost smiled at her attempt to scare him. "I did, he was a loose end, a broken weapon, a malfunctioning tool, but a dangerous device. The secrets he knew could have put Konoha and us in danger. I couldn't let such a threat live. It was for the good of the village," Danzo replied, making Kiyoko clench her sides in anger. "And now, look at where we are, you who crawled through the mud, not belonging in this world or anywhere. Until I found you. I gave you purpose, resolve, and above all, I allowed you to live. And this is how you repay me, baring your fangs and claws at me in defiance. You gave me a reason to live, but he gave me something to fight for," Kiyoko replied, as if she were explaining her feelings. "But we both know he's not really dead, he's like a cockroach after all. No matter how many times you flush him down the toilet, he always finds a way to crawl back up. So where is he? As smart as ever, even for someone with your condition," Dan said, referring to something the girl had all her life. Her eyes were blind. "You only made it through this world by being able to adapt. Because of that and your Keki Genkai, which I still want to harvest, you were useful," Danzo continued. Kiyoko didn't care at all. His words were empty and shallow. "As for where he is, I'm afraid I can't say. One of his usual stops is in a megacure, but he tends to fly around and never leaves a trail or clue behind. I'm sure you'll find him if you happen to pull on his tail. It looks like you won't be getting back together soon, though." When Danzo said those words, he took the decorated control device out from under his robes. Kiyoko didn't react at all to what he did. Though, before he left, he did leave me a few useful gifts. "I'm sure you'll be able to tell it apart too," Danzo said as he pushed the red button on the control device. Behind him, a cabinet opened up, and silvery mist leaked out of the doors and covered the ground inside. Kiyoko stepped back in fear as she felt a powerful source of chakra that was unlike anything else she had felt. The source of chakra was a black triangle prism with glowing blue lines and cracks running through it. After Danzo pressed the red button, lightning shaped chakra shot out from the prism and hit Kiyoko several times, shocking her and making her scream and moan in pain as she fell to the ground, holding her head and scraping her fingers against the ground. Danzo then stopped his attack as the lightning stopped completely, and Kiyoko seemed to gasp in relief as her form was stabilized. "Although you thought you had the upper hand, Dan's always had 3 steps ahead of you, and you were naive enough to think otherwise." He said this as he put down the control device and poured himself another cup of tea. What do you have the Zench? Asked Kiyoko, whose face was still buried in the ground and didn't need to look up at Danzo. Danzo laughed at her, thinking he was better than everyone else. You'll never know that. As you will be too busy dying, Danzo said as he picked up the device and pushed the red control device again. Even more lightning hit Kiyoko, but she was able to get to her knees in time to avoid getting hit again. She clutched her head in pain, and she felt like her whole body was being burned from the inside out. The pain wasn't like lightning, it felt like fire burning her from the inside and waves hitting her again. Danzo pressed the control device a third time, but the girl was still rolling around on the floor screaming into her pillow. Kiyoko knew she only had a few seconds to live, so she pressed her right hand against the ground. Black ink quickly appeared from the spot and swallowed her up, turning her body into ink, and she was gone. Danzo saw that she had escaped using a form of funjutsu of the highest caliber. In a dark alley in Konoha, black ink began to appear on the ground. Soon, an inky shape emerged from the black liquid, revealing Kiyoko, whose body was on fire from the effects of the Zencho. The girl with lavender hair picked herself up and leant against a wall, breathing heavily. She knew everything there was to know about the Zencho, a weapon made of pure funjutsu and created by a master of the art. She also knew she was lucky to be alive because most people who were affected by it died right there on the ground. She knew, though, that the Zencho wouldn't work as well without the Maebor. There's no telling what kind of damage Danzo could do to the world if he had the Zencho. The Zencho was so powerful that it could kill Biju and stop them from coming back to life. The Maebor was the only thing that could destroy the Zencho, so she had to find it. Without it, the Zencho's powers would be greatly diminished. The question is, where did he hide it? It had to be somewhere that no one could find it. You could not find any light in that place. Knowing him, he would have set up traps and security to protect it. He always liked to make things dramatic. The thing was, she didn't know if he had forgotten where the Maebor was. Did he bear it? Or was that another way for him to fail? She had to begin somewhere, so the hospital seemed like a good place to begin. No, she wasn't trying to find out where it was. She was trying to get inside his head and imagine where he would hide the Maebor from people who were looking for it. When she finally got to the hospital, she used the window, which is the only way ninjas can get in. She walked through the halls without a care in the world, not scared of the doctors or hurt shinobi that were there. After all, she was a great actress. Someone had to read a certain medical file for her while she looked for it. Even though Kiyoko was born blind, she had a natural talent that made her almost deaf. By constantly sending her chakra as pulses through the ground and around her, Kiyoko could see things that no other human could see. Her chakra worked like a sonar, picking up on anything it hit. She could see the world with her chakra and even notice ants crawling across the ground that other people might not have noticed. Though this ability did have some minor downsides, she couldn't tell much difference between things she could see, like facial features or written words on paper. For example, if you gave her a coin, she would only see the coin and not the details on it. She couldn't even tell the difference between colors. One problem with this ability was that she had to let go of chakra in order to see. This meant that censor type shinobi could easily and quickly find her, but she was able to avoid any of them. She finally got to a room that she thought was the room where doctors kept their files, or whatever they called it. When she went through the door, she could feel the several metal cabinets that held the files. She put her hand on one of the cabinets and sent a pulse of chakra through it. She wanted to find the biggest one. When she found the file, she quickly turned to her left, pulled out a cabinet, and grabbed the biggest one. She could only hope she had the right file because she couldn't read or write it. You couldn't even put your hand around the file because it was so big and heavy. Naruto Uzumaki was written in big, bold letters on a tag on the file. Kiyoko hid in the shadows of the room when she thought someone was coming. She used ninja wire to attach the file to her armor. She watched the person with her special sense. As the person walked in, she saw a girl about her age wearing a vest. Like top, shorts, gloves, low heeled calf, high boots, and elbow pads. She wore a forehead protector as a hairband and her hair was shoulder length. Kiyoko couldn't tell anything else about the girl's appearance. Lucky for Kiyoko, she wasn't a censor type. The real girl was Sakura, and she was finishing up her work at the hospital by doing the last thing she hated the most, making sure that all of the recorded files were in their rightful cabinets. She was also given a list of the hospital patients, so she knew that any files that were missing were those of the people who were still there. The fact that Sakura went through every cabinet shows how bored she was, like a child who has lost a toy. She was second only to Tsunade as the best medic in the village, but she had to do these chores. When Sakura opened a different cabinet, she saw that something was amiss. It was missing a big piece, and no two hospital patients' files had been taken from that cabinet. By checking both the cabinet number and the number on her own list, Sakura made it clear that something wasn't right. She went through all of the files and knew that patient 67, also known as Naruto Uzumaki, was the only one that was missing. She narrowed her eyes and felt a presence. If she concentrated enough, she could feel the chakra flowing through the room. Sakura put her hand on her shinobi holster and threw 2 shinobi at a shadow in the room. The figure hiding in the shadow dodged the attack, and when the figure came into the light, Sakura saw that it was a beautiful girl with lavender hair and milky white eyes who was wearing black and silver leather armor. Because Sakura didn't want the intruder to get away and didn't recognize the girl because she wasn't wearing a headband that showed her village loyalty, she attacked to stop the intruder in her tracks. The girl with pink hair punched the girl with lavender hair, but Kiyoko moved her head to let the punch pass. Sakura, Tsunade's apprentice, was hit twice by Kiyoko when he saw an opening. The attack made her cough so hard she was hoarse. Sakura, who didn't like being used as a punching bag, threw kunai at Kiyoko. The blind girl dodged them with grace and style, her pale eyes never moving because she didn't need to. As a way to get away from the fight so that the root agents who were after her wouldn't notice, Kiyoko used her Keki Genkai. She wouldn't kill the girl with pink hair unless she had to. Because she was a pacifist, she tried to stay away from death as much as possible. However, she didn't mind knocking people out or breaking their bones. Haiden. Kokorin, ice release, white ripple, she said as she finished her set of hand seals and held out her palm. Particles of ice built up around her hand and released an avalanche of freezing cold air that instantly froze anything caught in it. The air became frosty, and the room became frozen solid. After seeing the move, Sakura was able to hide by lifting a table just in time to avoid being frozen. She did, however, rub her shoulders and chatter her teeth. The tips of her fingers and the corners of her eyes looked like they were covered in ice, and her face was pale and her lips had a soft blue tint. Like that day, just like Haku, Sakura said, remembering the ice release user from her first C rank mission very well. She let out a breath into her hands, where she could clearly see it, and her body started shaking even more, as if her blood was freezing. The girl with lavender hair was a Keki Genkai, which only meant that she was related to Haku. With all her strength, Sakura jumped out from behind her cover and faced the girl, ready to fight her again. However, Sakura didn't see the girl at all, not even her voice. A few steps back, she was careful not to slip on the ice and lose her balance. Her whole body was shaking. She didn't know that a shadow with ninja wire in its hands was jumping behind her. Sakura could feel a tight wire squeezing her as it wrapped around her neck in an instant. As she put her hands on the wire to try to loosen its grip, she could see the girl's long lavender hair. The girl was now trying to kill her, but she didn't know that Kiyoko was using extreme methods to knock her out. But if there was one thing Sakura got from her master Tsunade, it was this. Was her dislike for losing. As Sakura's strength returned, she slammed Kiyoko into a frozen wall. The blind girl grunted in pain, but her grip on the wire didn't break. Sakura tried the same move again and rammed Kiyoko into another wall, this time making her moan in pain and a little loosening her grip on the wire. Sakura used her last bit of natural strength to jump backwards and land on Kiyoko instead of herself. Kiyoko took the full force of the attack, and her grip finally broke, stunning her for a moment. Kiyoko had to give it to the girl, though. She was smart and lasted longer than most against her. To use Kyoko's state of being dazed to her advantage, Sakura charged up a lot of chakra into her fist and hit Kiyoko where she was. The ice release user could be killed with just one strike, because Sakura thought she was too dangerous to escape. When Kiyoko felt her opponent's powerful attack coming, she moved out of the way just in time as Sakura slammed her fist into the ground, breaking it. The two girls then fell through the floor and into a hallway below, where many of the doctors, nurses, and patients gasped in shock and surprise to see Sakura lying on the ground with a beautiful girl nearby, with ice, debris, and files on them with small pebbles to hit them. Both girls were moaning about how painful it was to fall through a floor and have things fall on top of them. They moved around a bit to get their bodies and limbs to feel normal again. Other than a few people, no one had really challenged Kiyoko. It wasn't that she was cocky, it was just that Kiyoko couldn't test her power against many people, not that she would. Kiyoko stood on her knees and lifted some debris off of her body. She could feel the girl with the pink hair staring at her with daggers as Sakura also lifted some debris off of her. From the way her chakra pulsed through the hospital, Kiyoko could tell that one of the walls was weak and would lead outside if it was broken. She couldn't use the same way to escape as when she ran from Danzo and the Zencho because she didn't have enough chakra to use that jutsu again, so she came up with a plan for her escape. Kiyoko knew she had to get her opponent to run away, but she didn't know what to say. Then she realized she was blind. Man, being blind is good. At least I don't have to see your ugly face, Kiyoko said. The pink-haired girl and Kiyoko both stood up straight, which made Sakura think. But the insults made her forget that they were talking about how a blind girl could know what ugly meant. That doesn't matter if I can see or not. Your ugly face would have made me blind anyway. A red dot appeared on Sakura's forehead and dark flames whirled around her. I mean, your parents must have been good looking, you must be what's left. Die whore. Sakura yelled as she charged at Kiyoko like a wild bull, eyes filled with lust for blood. She clenched her fist with chakra, ready to hit Kiyoko, while the girl with lavender hair hid behind a weak wall, waiting for Sakura to strike. Sakura just barely avoided the chakra. Enhanced fist that flew past her head. Her fist hit the wall and broke into many pieces, and Kiyoko pushed Sakura away and jumped through the hole in the wall to get to her freedom. When she landed outside the hospital, root drones swarmed around her right away, and the village's rain hit their bodies hard. With his fingers on a wireless communicator that was plugged into his ear, one of the root agents spoke. Asked his leader, orders, Danzo. Sama. The commander of Root replied, the 13th Order. The Ambu captain nodded and waved to his fellow soldiers. The captain yelled, bind her. And all of the Root agents nodded and took the chains off the scrolls around their waists. Kiyoko knew something wasn't right, so she attacked her captors by pulling out her sais. When the Root agents threw them at her, she used her amazing senses to pick up the sound of the chains clinking. But Root was very flexible. They knew that the way they were trying to capture would not work, so they threw all the chains at once. Kiyoko tried to block as many of the chains as she could, but they were too many. They wrapped around her legs, arms, and neck, making her feel so suffocated that she fell to her knees and dropped her sai. The strong-willed woman tried to fight back, but instead of tying her up, the chains were whipped against her body, possibly to show that she gave up or just to make the Root agents laugh. Sakura watched everything from the big hole she made in the hospital wall. She wasn't sure if she should be scared or happy about what was happening, but she knew the girl didn't deserve to be whipped with chains like she was a slave. She had no idea why she was doing what she was doing or if she was really an enemy. In fact, she was the one who attacked the blind girl first, and the girl who was attacked was only acting in self-defense. The girl with pink hair could see what she thought was the Ambu captain coming toward her. When Kiyoko felt the steps of the Root agent, she could feel a lot of chakra building up in the Root captain's hand. The chakra became very foul, and she felt it everywhere. He created it. She knew everything about his seals, even the ones that were cursed. She had no idea or expectation that Danzi would do something so horrible, something worse than death. It is the 13th Order. The Root captain's bare hand had a black seal with 3 rows of rectangles that were all the same size and a long rectangle at the bottom. It was clear that Kiyoko was shaking and sweating because of the seal. She was trying to break free from her bonds. But it didn't matter because they stood firm against her thrashing, almost like trees with roots in the ground. Once this seal was put on a person, she knew they couldn't break it because it was burned into their skin and mind. Any Root shinobi who goes bad could always use it. As a last-ditch effort to get away, Kiyoko started yelling and screaming bad words. She had enough chakra for a few jutsus, but her hands were tied together, so she couldn't make the seals she needed to get away. Even though Sakura was just watching, she could hear the girl almost crying out in pain. She knew that whatever was going on wasn't on the orders of her Hokage. Since Sakura yelled, "No, stop!" the Ambu captain looked up at her just as she was about to touch Kiyoko on the forehead. As soon as Kiyoko saw the shinobi's step slow down, he attacked by biting his fingers. The man screamed as Kyoko's teeth sank into his fingers, and the captain tried to pull his fingers out of her mouth, where they started to bleed. Kiyoko also saw that Sakura had caught the attention of the other root soldiers. It was clear that they weren't following some of their orders properly. Pulling on the chains that were holding her arms together, Kiyoko made a seal with her hands. Hyoden. Howringu Shimo Fewer, Ice Release, Howling Frost Touch, Kiyoko thought to herself as she grabbed the chains. As she did, frost and ice started to cover the metal, making it brittle and easy to break. The chains quickly broke, and Kiyoko made another set of seals to get away. Hyoden. Juhaku, Ice Release, White Tree, and the ground at her feet covered in frost, making it sparkling and gleaming in the sun. It spread so quickly that the root agents were frozen in the frost and looked like statues made of ice. After that, there was a violent little snowstorm. Snowflakes danced around Kyoko's shape, and soon she was gone. In another area, there was an 8-sided metal room with small rectangular windows that let in almost no light. There were 2 figures there. One was lying on a bed in the corner of the room, and the other was staring at a wound on his side while blood leaked from his mouth. Following a short fight with their enemy's goons, they traded blows with each other. The blonde man won because he was more skilled and powerful. A little over 2 years ago, the man with black hair thought he was nothing more than a bug compared to him. Now, he saw how much he had grown. The man with black hair now felt like he was comparing himself to a bug or a mountain that hit the clouds and sky. The black man was one of the smartest and best people in his village, but the blonde was too strong for him, even after all those years of experience. The 2 men were Itachi Uchiha, the now dead heir to the Uchiha clan, and Ryu Yokaze, whose real name was Naruto Uzumaki and was the son of the Yondaime Hokage, a member of the Senju clan, and Madara's student. Naruto and Itachi had fought each other in battle in a megacure while being surrounded by soldiers from Root, a training division of Anbu Black Ops led by the extremist Danzo Shimura, with whom both had a history. They looked at each other and didn't move their eyes. Itachi, stop using genjutsu so much. It's getting old, Naruto said, which almost made Itachi smile as his form turned into a flock of crows. In its place was the body of a root agent with a big cut on their side. He then looked up and saw Itachi standing on the other side of the room, his Sharingan fully charged. I've been searching for you for a long time, Itachi. I was rather beginning to think that you didn't want to be found. I was beginning to think that you didn't want to be dead, the Uchiha said, his face unmoving and his eyes deep in thought. Naruto gave the Uchiha the same look back and then put chakra into his left eye to get ready to fight. Itachi was ready to act when he saw the changing patterns in the Uzumaki's eyes because he could feel Naruto's chakra building up. He was right when he said that Naruto could awaken the next stage of the Sharingan, the Mangekyo Sharingan. Or maybe he evolved his eye even more. Itachi didn't know what to think about the man in front of him. He knew this man was the most dangerous person he had ever met, even more dangerous than Nagato and Madara. It was hard to believe that someone like him existed. How did he gain so much power in such a short time? He seemed to be connected to a battery that gave him strength and skill. Itachi quickly noticed Naruto's Mangekyo pattern. It looked like 3 scythes with points on the backs of the blades. There was a pinwheel pattern around the pupil, and the pupil itself wasn't a circle but a shuriken with 3 points. Naruto looked at the dead root agent while Itachi was getting ready to move. Amaterasu, Naruto thought as black flames started to appear where he was looking, which was the body of the root agent. Within a few minutes, the flames had covered and consumed the agent's body, leaving only black flames and flickering fire visible. Itachi calmed down a bit when he saw what was going on, but he didn't do anything else besides watch his enemy. Itachi said, "So you've been alive the whole time." Naruto raised his head, and his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan pattern disappeared, being replaced by his normal Sharingan. There was no way for the Uchiha to understand how Naruto got his clan's Keki Genkai and learned how to use it well without being a Uchiha. It made no sense. Not all this time, but yes, I was alive, and you obviously thought I hadn't died, unlike the rest of the world who really think I'm dead while celebrating the murder. And I'd like it to stay that way, so you could say Naruto Uzumaki is dead. Naruto said this as he watched the black flames die down and the body turn into ashes. But the boundaries of life and death can be easily blurred. Perhaps I merely faked my death, perhaps I really did die, maybe someone died in my place. It makes no difference as I am here now. And once again it was out of that village's control. Their contradictions of me being a demon was childish, as if a demon was crafted from that night of horror, battle and death. They believed I was evil from the moment I was birthed. The thing they don't understand is that evil is never born, it is something that is created and festered within us all, but I myself believe that evil is a labeled term when someone disagrees with the ideals of another. So, you really don't plan to go back to the village? Itachi asked with a neutral expression on his face. He had to know if Naruto would still have some loyalty to Konoha even if he killed his friend. But Ashikaga knew that Noro might not feel the way Itachi did about the question. Village? Why would I return to a place that clearly doesn't want me around nor do I feel any emotional attachment to? It's ludicrous to believe that I will defend and fight for a place that has done nothing but damn me. There, I was a fox among dogs and sheep, unwanted, not recognized, but now I'm a wolf, and I have still found nothing to satisfy me. I won't destroy Konoha, it's not like the buildings desired to hurt or wound me," said Naruto. "So you really don't feel anything," Itachi said as he looked blankly at Naruto, who looked back at him the same way. But Naruto bowed his head and thought. He wondered if what Itachi had said was true. Did he really have feelings that were buried deep inside him and not gone? Or was it cold and empty, as Itachi said? The many times he thought about this subject, he always imagined Konan. He didn't know why, but he always saw her when he was thinking about how he felt, and there was always someone else with her. He wasn't sure who it was, but he could remember them. Naruto then turned his head back to look at Itachi. His blood red eyes showed that he was feeling empty. In response, Naruto said, "Nothing at all." The defeated Uchiha didn't even make a face.
Itachi asked, "But what are your plans?"
"What do you want most?" He didn't move his lips, just asked. Naruto replied, "That which will separate everyone from their fate, a state of complete happiness where everything will be yours and nothing will be everything. You won't be chained or wearing crowns. An endless dream." His Sharingan eyes lit up a little at the thought of it. "Make no mistake, Itachi. War is coming, with all its glory and all its horror, and even you will be trampled before it." "As for that," Itachi said, "we'll see about that, but Naruto, you know you can change the world without war. Join a good cause, fight for the people. Join Konoha, and things will be different. Just put aside your hatred and rejoin Konoha, they can change." He said this while trying to convince the blonde man in front of him to forget about all the problems in the world and in his own life. Naruto stood up straight from the bed and said, "I don't join. I lead. And I will lead this world into a new era. Every living thing in the world will bow before my eye or else they will die. Obedience or oblivion, that is why I fight. Even with your eyes you're still blind to the possibilities of this world. You once wanted to be Hokage and you wanted the wisdom that came with the title, the ideals you strived for. A Hokage must see the good in all things no matter how far they have fallen, and now all you see is what you wish to see. A Hokage must weigh the good and evil of their actions upon their shoulders and still must adhere to his ideals," rebuked Itachi, which caused Naruto to close his eyes at the person. Naruto said, "Let the priests argue about what is good and evil. They can live in my new world or they can die in their old one." This made his Sharingan glow so brightly that you could almost see steam coming out of the orbs. "Perhaps. But you won't live to see it," Itachi said as he quickly pulled out a kunai and rushed over to stab Naruto. Naruto only raised his right hand and sent chakra into his right eye. Then Itachi's kunai missed its target by a centimeter, and the blonde's right hand crushed the Uchiha's neck. Naruto slammed his fist into Itachi's throat again and subdued him with Kamiyoninyo, Tekken Saibutsu Senshikote, Iron Fist Subjugate One of the Tyrant Emperor. Itachi could feel his body fighting against Naruto's as he twirled the kunai in his hand and held it in a reverse grip. He heard a scream in the back of his mind, but he was stunned because he didn't know how he had fallen under Naruto's influence. As they went by on the industrial tower. "A storm is coming that can't be stopped." He then raised his arm and prepared to stab himself in the stomach, which would probably kill him. Itachi put chakra into his eyes and thought of the only way to get away from Naruto's grip. Soon, Itachi's arm moved to stab him in the stomach, where he would die a slow death. "Fitting that we should face oblivion together," Itachi yelled, "Never," as he used his own Mangekyo Sharingan to fight Naruto's Kamiyoninyo. He twirled the kunai back to its normal shape and swung it at Naruto. Naruto jumped back, and an aura that looked like red flame began to swirl around him. Naruto just watched in shock as someone fought against Kamiyoninyo and tried to hit him while he was under its control. He finally woke up and was amazed by Itachi after the shock wore off and his eyes got stronger. But then he felt a warm drip run down his neck and stain his black cloak. When he looked down, he saw blood on the torso of his cloak from a diagonal cut that began near his ear and ended near his Adam's apple, where red liquid was oozing out. Naruto just widened his eyes at the implication and then turned his attention back to Itachi as he stared at the Uchiha. Fate cannot be changed. The end comes. And when it finds me, Naruto said as he used his natural healing power, Oshi no Shuduan, teachings of the monastery, to cover the cut with a scar. I shall embrace it, at last. Naruto was a little surprised to see a scar, but he thought that Itachi had used a very incomplete Susanoo to temporarily resist Kamiyonino's control, which explained the red flaming aura around him and made him stronger. That was the only possible reason why it left a scar. He had to praise him because he was the second person to leave a scar on him. The first was his younger brother Sasuke, who killed him in the Valley of the End. Naruto then moved toward the iron bars that stood between him and the door, and opened them up so that he could put both fists on the eight-sided door, which moved open. Itachi asked, "Tell me why I shouldn't kill you right now." The red flame aura around him got brighter. Naruto only gave the Uchiha a quick look and a small smirk. Naruto said, "Because I can give you what you've always wanted, a chance." He then opened the eight-sided door all the way, letting the wind hit him hard and whip his bloody cloak around. Both were on top of a mountain that looked like a pagoda. The pagoda was made of metal and could only be reached through the door Naruto opened. There were several mountain-like rock structures around the pagoda. Different plants and minerals grew on top of the rocky spires that rose high above the clouds, where it was very humid and windy. It would be very hard for anyone to climb out of the spires because the rocks were slippery and the spires were so tall that it would take days to get to the top. Naruto said, "It's up to you whether you take it or not." He then walked out of the pagoda and stood on the edge of the cliff, looking down at the ground. He then fell off the edge without a fearful twitch. After seeing Naruto's falling body, Itachi only widened his eyes and chased after him. The Uchiha jumped off the cliff to catch the blonde. As Naruto was skydiving headfirst through the clouds and dodging the cliffs, he felt Itachi closing in on him. He looked back and saw the Uchiha moving forward and closing in on him. Naruto just raised an eyebrow at Itachi, saying that even with Susanoo, you couldn't make it through the fall without certain skills. Itachi slammed his body into Naruto and wrestled with him when he finally caught up to the blonde Uzumaki. But Naruto got out of the hold and punched Itachi twice and kicked him away. Not one to give up, Itachi pulled out the Tanbogiri. No. Tsurugi sword he had won in his last fight with Naruto and threw it at the Uzumaki, planning to kill him in the air. Natsu, on the other hand, just flipped, grabbed the Tanbogiri out of the air, and sealed it back into his wrist seals. Itachi still had his Mangekyo Sharingan active, so he used his Susanoo to make its skeletal arm appear and tried to grab Naruto. But the blonde used his own Susanoo to make a skeletal white arm appear and block Itachi's attack. With the help of nature's forces, the two sped down towards the ground faster and faster. The ground was almost in sight, and their death was just around the corner. They never stopped going faster and faster, and the wind felt like it was ripping their faces apart. Because Itachi was afraid of dying, his Susanoo moved on to the next level, where the Uchiha made his whole Susanoo. It had a face that looked like a person's, hair around its head, a pointed chin, and two sets of arms joined at the elbow. It was about the size of a house. Naruto just turned off his Susanoo and kept speeding toward the ground. He then flipped in the air, letting Itachi pass him because the Uchiha was in front of him. Naruto then sent chakra into his left eye, which turned on his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. Itachi was about to hit the ground when a black and purple portal appeared in front of him and sucked him up and sent him to a different place in Kamiyoniniyo, Sutepu no Shinigami, Steps of the Death God. After that, the portal shut down, and Naruto opened it again, but this time he was also swallowed up by it. The portal needed a solid surface to appear. Itachi never lost any speed when he came out of the portal. He and Susanoo crashed into a hard surface, destroying the ethereal warrior so badly that not even shards of its skeleton were left. Because of how hard it hit, the ground split and cracked, and dust clouds formed. Itachi was in pain because his Susanoo wasn't protecting him well enough. He had to give Naruto credit for knowing how to use his abilities well. Then Itachi got up and brushed his cloak clean of any dirt, dust, or broken things. A quick look around the area led him back to a megacure, where he and Naruto had killed the root agents who had come to arrest or kill the blonde. There was something wrong with the picture, though. His question was quickly answered when a black and purple portal appeared to his right. In the blink of an eye, Naruto shot out of it, and like Itachi, he didn't lose any speed in the fall because he used the Earth's natural forces to make himself stronger. Because of that, he moved so quickly that Itachi barely had time to recognize him before the Sharingan wrapped its palm around his face and slammed into an Omegacure building. Because the force was so strong, the building fell to the ground, scattering pipes and other objects in a cloud of dust. The building's impact made the ground shake a little. As soon as people felt the shocks and saw the people, they ran away in fear and shock. A dust cloud settled over them as chaos and broken things fell all around them. Naruto picked up Itachi Uchiha's limp, torn, and battered body. Naruto then threw the Uchiha to the ground, where the former Anbu captain just slouched and fell over like a stack of rocks. Naruto knew Itachi was still alive, but he didn't know if he was awake or not until Itachi answered his questions. In either case, he did what Nagato told him to do, like a devoted dog that chews on its own collar. They say there is nothing stronger than our world. They say that no matter how much power we gain, how hard we train, or how much we want to be, we are all nothing compared to the world, small and insignificant. I just channeled the world's power into myself, so one has to wonder if what they say is true, Naruto said as he looked down at the defeated Uchiha, who was coughing a little because his ribs were broken. Itachi felt like he was hit by 1,000 lightning bolts and bricks all at the same time. He could only feel his own heavy heartbeat and the pain that was going through him. Naruto didn't think Itachi would answer, so he put chakra into his right eye, which made his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan pattern show up. Tell me everything you know of the Uchiha massacre. Back in Konoha, Tsunade was looking at the root agents' frozen bodies, which were being thawed out by her shinobi, as well as the huge hole her apprentice had made in the hospital wall. Sakura, her apprentice, told her what happened. Sakura was still mad at her, so she told her about a strange blind girl who broke into the hospital and was looking for Naruto Uzumaki's file. As soon as people found out that Naruto was Minato's son, they stopped liking the blonde boy. This made Tsunade think that Iwa was involved. They were almost yelling for Naruto's head, but they found out later that he was already dead. But even so, only Iwa and Kumo would have had the power and resources to do something like that, while the girl's Keki Genkai matched Kiri's. Kumo may have just taken her hostage for her Keki Genkai, or she may have run away from Kiri during the bloodline purges. At the moment, it didn't matter because those three villages were the most likely to have done it. All of these strange events meant that she wasn't ready to fight a war if she took the matter to the other villages. Also, Danz must have upset someone if Root was involved. That was something he did a lot. Taking something good and making it worse. Like what happened with the Anbu Root agent who was only known as Tekurufu. Things were going well until they got out of hand that day. It could have been stopped, but Danzo did it for the sake of Konoha. He justified himself that way because he thought he was better than everyone else, whether they went his way or the highway. Then Tsunade heard the tapping of the cane and turned around to see the second most hated man in Konoha. Shimura Danzo. In her brown eyes, Tsunade asked Danzo, "You wouldn't have had anything to do with this?" Danzo kept a straight face and limped over to stand next to Tsunade. Danzo replied, "None. I know nothing of today's events. Only that whoever they were, they got more than they asked for." The Hokage narrowed her eyes at the man. She knew what he said was nonsense. She had no evidence to convict him, but Tsunade could still look into it. "And where is your apprentice?" She saw these girls' powers firsthand, Danzo asked as he watched his soldiers get warmed up by medics and shinobi while the frozen grass crunched all around them. She briefed us as soon as the main forces arrived, and then she left the village with Inze Hosoku for the capital to represent Konoha in the courts of the Land of Fire, Tsunade said, making sure her face didn't show that she didn't like the man next to her. As Danzo opened one of his squinted eyes to see how Tsunade would react, he said, "You know what kind of message this would send to our enemies and our allies." All of this was a test to see if Tsunade was changing into what he thought would be a truly great Hokage. Even with everything that had happened and how Danzo had tried to bring her down at every turn, she couldn't see it, but he could. There were little things that only he could see that others couldn't. But he was responsible for what happened today, even though he tried to hide it. He was waiting to see what Tsunade would do. Yes. Weakness. We need to train our forces harder, stronger. You've seen it too, the villages are rallying their forces for what we don't know. And then Ryu Yokaze and this girl enter the fray. You of all people should know that this is more than just a coincidence. Spoke Tsunade as she looked over to Danzo, who nodded at her. Yokaze, Akatsuki, the hidden villages, the 5 great nations, this is leading to something. Events that were sparked long ago, sins committed by people who are now dust. I feel that what is happening is the manipulation of events by an unknown faction or the guidance of a teacher. The Akatsuki will be involved in some way no matter what, Danzo said as he looked back at the frozen root agents. If you wish to know, my spies and contacts have heard of whispers being spun about a shadow organization known as the Kokorin, an organization made up of shinobi from all of the 5 great nations. If you haven't noticed, many shinobi have gone rogue and became missing. Nin from outside and within our own village, and the other villages, even the minor ones. Their operations are small, their resources limited, and we have no clue to their military strength. But one thing we do know is once they join they disappear into nothingness, no trace of themselves left behind. The only way to tell they're gone is to check the list of shinobi. You'll see names missing and the number is smaller. They strike hard and fast, kill without question, then they fade into the night. The Kokorin are still an unknown factor, but I fear they will make their public appearance soon, and whoever is their leader will be spearheading their operations.
I might feel bad about this, but keep an eye on the Kokorin.
If it has someone like you. Well, being interested, their presence will have effects, Tsunade said before she left for her office. Danz, on the other hand, stayed behind and smiled. He was afraid of what the Kokorin might have planned for Konoha, though. You could call him Pain, Nagato, or anything else you wanted. He had just sensed that Itachi and Ryu were back, and he could see the dust cloud that was forming where they were having their heated spar. It felt like it was going to end soon, and Zetsu had picked a beautiful flower from a field of thorns. Nagato couldn't lose Ryu Yokaze. Even though he admired the man's strength, he didn't really like the man himself. Especially how close he was to his childhood. He wasn't blind, so he could see and feel how the woman with blue hair was looking at him. She still had the same look on her face. It looked like Konan was looking at him with just a little bit of worry on her face when he turned to his right. Nagato's real body, which was hurt, frowned at that. Even though he wasn't a fan of scaled blue hair clips or very good at jewelry, he thought they were beautiful. He also noticed that her right hand was twitching a little, almost like she wanted to put it over her heart, and he could see her eyes getting a little less open with each second that went by. Nagato said, "You seem to have grown very attached to Yokaze." This made Konan snap her head at him with a confused look on her face. When she looked into his steel eyes, she could see that they were almost half dead. It scared her at first to just look into those eyes. But over the years, she had gotten used to the strongest dojutsu. He replied, "We are partners. Our relationship is professional, and we just look out for each other." Konan, who had full control over her body and face, looked out over a megacure like she was her friend. But did he get it right? Did she like the strong player of the Sharingan? She didn't know what to think of him. He seemed cold, but he was really someone you wanted to love. Was it selfish of her to say she wanted something like that after all the heartache she had been through? Nagato said, "Professional.
Of course.
Don't let your feelings of longing get in the way. You should be able to see that. And if we give in to the primal feelings of sentimentality and appreciation, we simply lose what is important to us," Konan replied, giving him a small frown. She had lost the people she loved most in the past, but maybe there was another chance for her. With Naruto and Itachi, who had been defeated. Naruto couldn't help but clench his fist in anger after the Uchiha told him all the dirty secrets that the elders of Konoha were keeping. There was more he had learned than just the Uchiha massacre. He had learned the worst things about the Hidden Leaf Village. Because of the elders, the Hokage, and the villagers, he never got to have people he could love and care for. After putting more chakra into his right eye and seeing his eternal Mangekyo Sharingan appear, Naruto asked, "Is that it?" As Itachi lay on the ground, breathing hard, he said, "Yes." He felt like he was on the edge of life and death. Naruto then walked up to the shinobi who was on the ground and put his right palm over Itachi's chest using Shozen Jutsu, a magical palm technique. Itachi's breath calmed down. Itachi knew that the blonde wasn't doing this out of kindness. He knew that the Uzumaki had other plans for him. He just didn't know what those plans were. Now that everything was over, Naruto left Itachi on the ground and went back to Pain's tower, his mission complete. A girl wearing a hood and having pale lavender hair was making her way through the slums of the Land of Fire's capital to meet with someone she had known since childhood and trusted with her life. She thought of this person as a brother in every way except blood. She had to stay out of sight because just being in Konoha made the shinobi and Anbu very angry. Danzo has sent his root agents to find her and may use her to help find the Maebor. She quickly ducked in and out of the swarms and crowds of poor and unfortunate people. She couldn't help but feel their sadness. She had to do something to help them, but she didn't want to draw the wrong kind of attention to herself. She could feel the poverty in the streets, and she knew her friend would be safe in this kind of area. Through her chakra pulses, she could feel everything going on around her. She could feel people going about their days, crying and moaning, and crime was everywhere. That is, until she felt something strange. There were 2 signatures of shinobi whose feet were lighter than usual. Then she had a clearer picture in her mind. They were Danzig's goons looking for her in the slums. As soon as she saw the sensors, she quickly ducked into one of the alleys and lowered the amount of chakra she used. She quickly walked past a thief and turned around to avoid her across the trash and dirt. The root agents were no longer following her, but that didn't mean they were gone for good. She lowered her chakra level and couldn't feel how far away something was. She had to quickly get together with her friend. Soon, she found his house in the slums. It was a run-down, unkempt house made of broken wood and bricks with holes in the roof and walls. It looked like it would fall apart if you touched it, which was probably true because she could hear the wood inside rattling and the windows were about to come off their hinges. Kiyoko only opened the door to the house, and the loud creaking let the person know she was there. The person was sitting in a chair with candy wrappers, comics, and soda cans all over the floor and around him. His snoring was so loud it could wake the dead. Kiyoko then pulled down her hood and saw the person. Every once in a while, the man would jerk around and mumble some words that only Koiku could understand. If Kiyoko could see, she would have laughed at the trail of spit that was coming out of his mouth. When the man woke up from his nap on the couch, he would see brown eyes and long red hair that reached his shoulders and covered most of his face. He wore his hair in a high ponytail most of the time to keep it out of his face. He wasn't wearing a shirt right now, so anyone who looked at him could see his muscles and tribal tattoos. If Kiyoko could see, she would notice that he had gotten more tattoos since the last time they met, and now they covered his whole back, upper torso, and forehead with tribal tattoos. He no longer has eyebrows because he got tattoos that look like them. He was wearing hakama pants that fell a little on the sides. He didn't have shoes on and had wristbands on both hands. When Kiyoko screamed, the man woke up and fell flat on his face, spilling his food and cans all over him. Kiyoko quickly held his bleeding nose while he rolled around on the floor and may have started crying. This time, Kiyoko laughed at his bad luck while mumbling rude words that his mother would probably hit him over the head with and give him a punishment that was right for his age. Next, he got up from the ground and put tissues in his nose to stop the bleeding. He then picked up a half-empty soda can from the ground and drank from it before throwing it away. He then turned to look at Kiyoko. The man said, "Oh, it's just you, Kiyoko," and then he laid down on his side. He quickly fell back to sleep on his couch, making Kiyoko angry. "Oh, it's just you, Kiyoko. We haven't seen each other in 6 months and that's the first thing you say to me, you lazy bum." Kiyoko spoke as she crossed her arms and pouted like a child because she didn't like her friend. "Oh, it's just you, Kiyoko. Nice to see ya." The man said this while he was tired and about to fall back asleep. The girl with lavender hair nodded to show that she agreed. "So have you been busy with whatever you do?" Kiyoko asked. But when she looked over, her friend was either sound asleep again or had died. When she kicked a can, it hit the man right in the face, making him scream again in pain because his nose was bleeding. He got up and glared at the girl, who just smiled at him. "No, really, it's great to see you. I've been feeling lonely for a while. I have nothing better to do than what I do. So you stopped by to see your friend Eugen? That's better than breaking into Danzo's not so secret base and trying to kill them, man." The man who was now known as Eugen said this as he stretched his body and cracked his joints and neck. He had a really bad kink in it. "Don't ask how I know, I just do, and since Danzo is still alive it means you failed and you came by for me to give you a hug, a warm beverage and saying it's alright before sending you on your way to the merry unknown." Even though that was exactly why she came here, Kiyoko crossed her arms and kept a straight face as she stood there. She had other things to worry about. Yujin just stared blankly at Kiyoko as she said, and you probably already know that Danzo has the Zencho. What the Zench? Is it some kind of food? Yujin asked as he slowly opened one eye to look at the blind girl who was tapping her foot at the man. It is the strongest weapon ever made by humans. It is a literal fuinjutsu weapon that is so complex that only the next 5 generations will be able to partially copy it. It absorbs chakra all around it so quickly that it can power itself, and it sends out blasts of corrosive chakra in the form of lightning and shockwaves that it attacks chakra, leaving any shinobi helpless against it. And can easily kill armies and beej. Koiku had a snobbish way of talking that only a child could copy. As Yujin smiled at the thought, sounds awesome. Whoever made that weapon must have been a true master of fuinjutsu to make something so complicated. He even doubted that the famous Uzumaki clan, who were also masters of fuinjutsu, could make something so complicated. No, it's not cool. If Danzo has it, he could destroy the whole world of shinobi with it. No one, no matter how strong, would be able to stand up to him. With the full power of the Zencho, not even the Shodem would be able to beat him. Kiyoko yelled, and she did some breathing exercises to calm her down. It's clear that he's not doing something right since he hasn't already destroyed the world. I mean, if I had this Zencho thing, I would have probably taken over the world by now. That's why you're really here, Yujin said with his arms crossed over his chest. A big file was around her waist and was being held by ninja wire. Kiyoko then took it off and threw it onto Yujin's lap. He grunted and it landed right on him. The Zencho was created by Root Agent Code. Named Tekurufu, who weaved together many advanced and forbidden seals to form the weapon and give it physical shape. Kiyoko talked about what she knew about the history of the Zencho. He made it under the false pretense that it was for the Hokage in the village, but it was really for Danzo. Tekurufu's real name was. Not many people know it. Yujin read the paper in his lap and said, Naruto Uzumaki. Kiyoko then let out a sigh of relief that she had found the right file. To be honest, she had picked up the biggest one thinking it was his. She was glad that her trip to Konoha wasn't just for sightseeing, though. Yeah, anyway he created the Zencho to serve the Hokage, and use it alongside one of his previous inventions, the Maebor, only then can the Zencho's power can be fully used. Spoke Kiyoko as she kept talking. Not Yujin, though, because he kept reading the file. This guy, I mean kid, has suffered from every physical trauma documented in the world and possibly some new ones, and to suffer all that at his age. Throughout his whole life. Yujin felt sick to his stomach just reading the file. The horrible things people did to this boy were written down in it, and they even did bad things to him while he was in the hospital getting treatment. Kiyoko did nothing but listen to what he said and try to hold back a few tears that were coming. What kind of animal would hurt someone like this? I don't get it. It's better that you don't know. That pain happened a long time ago. That's how it should stay. What else does it say? Kiyoko asked as she looked at her friend. Yeah, some notes here and there, but one of the doctors found the kid writing in some kind of journal, which was written down and given to the Hokage himself. From the pages of the journal, the doctors could only see darkness in the deep, and only those without eyes. That's pretty much it. What's the Maebor? Yujin asked in a deadpan voice. If you find the journal, you can probably find this. The casual Kiyoko answer was, it's a dagger. That's it? She asked Yujin if the Maebor had any more to offer. It was the first version of the Zench. The Maebor could only be used to stab someone, which would kill them instantly because the dagger destroys their chakra. The Zencho, on the other hand, can damage anything nearby with chakra. The Zench's full power is found when both are used together, replied Kiyoko. That's likely where Naruto wrote down where the Maebor was in his journal. If Danzo finds it, we're in trouble. Good luck with your search, and have a fun adventure, Yujin said as he threw Naruto's file away and went back to sleep. What are you on about? Koiku asked happily, don't you want to go on an adventure? No. Don't you wish to see everything this world has to offer? No. Don't you want to get stronger? No. I'm okay. That's it, you're coming with me, and you will like it. Kiyoko spoke as she grabbed Yujin by the hair and dragged him out of his house while he screamed bad words at her. But they forgot that Yujin was almost naked since he only had his pants on. In a megacure, Naruto Uzumaki's character Ryu Yokaze was walking non-stop to Pain's tower in the middle of the village. He had been walking since he beat Itachi Uchiha, the spy and traitor among the Akatsuki and the dead heir of the Uchiha clan. Naruto quickly went up to Itachi, beat him with little effort, and put him under the influence of his eyes. Even so, Naruto had found a weakness in his eyes' powers and would have to find out how far they could go. People who have the Mangekyo Sharingan can resist its effects. Naruto could fix this by putting even more power into his eyes. Itachi, on the other hand, left the blonde a nice goodbye gift, a scar that went from her ear to near Naruto's Adam's apple. To date, only 2 marks have been made on the blonde that will never go away. The first time, Sasuke killed him with his Chidori, leaving a scar on his chest. That scar would always remind him that only people close to you can really hurt you, which is why the blonde didn't want anyone to get close to him. They might hurt him in the end, and he had already been through enough pain in his life. But Naruto had to praise Itachi for leaving a scar on him, because no one else had ever been able to do something like that Naruto couldn't heal from. He had the Mangekyo Sharingan too, but he had no idea that the eye itself could be strong enough to fight his abilities. In many ways, the Uchiha were strange. He fixed Itachi's wounds because the blonde with the Sharingan still had some uses for the older Uchiha brother, which Naruto was already planning to use. Things still needed to be manipulated, and the villages needed to be watched because they still had roles to play in the bigger picture. Everyone in Naruto's plan, man, woman, child, and animal, had a role to play. He could see and hear everything, and he had a lot of spies. His power was almost limitless. Everything would fall into place, and no one would even know what happened, as long as nothing major happened to him. As Naruto watched Pain's tower get closer, he had no choice but to climb to the roofs and avoid the buildings by jumping over them. Nagato was the only Akatsuki who didn't follow his orders, but even so, evil always finds its way into the hearts of those they least expect it, and Naruto was never one to give up. It got higher and higher until Naruto could see the faces of Yahiko and Konan's dead bodies. They felt better. Naruto wasn't sure what he saw at first. Was it just a mirage? If it was, then he couldn't understand things like relief. But Konan frowned a little when she saw Nagato's plan for Ryu. She could see his shape jumping around like a frog on lily pads. She had a feeling that Ryu had quickly caught Itachi and finished the mission he was given. Nagato had just told her about it. However, she saw the scar on Ryu's neck and knew he was fine since it wasn't bleeding, but she still felt like she needed to worry because she was learning more and more about Ryu Yokaze and could tell that he was still kind, compassionate, and willing to help. He wouldn't believe that these things existed or ever will exist, which was the only thing that stopped them. Naruto finally made it to the top of the tower, where he saw Pain and Konan's faces. He walked in and shook off any water that had been on him. He took the Shiromikairan out of its seal and gave it back to Konan. She was grateful and thanked the blonde shinobi with the red eyes, who nodded in response. Pain looked at the young man with the Sharingan meeting his Rinnegan and said, "I take it that since you're here, Itachi has been dealt with." The young man stared back at him with a blank face. Nagato only had to listen to the words they spoke that didn't require movements of the lips to understand that anger had been building between them and that it could be released at any time with one wrong move. Naruto took his eyes off of Nagato's sharp, ringed eyes and said, "Itachi is still alive, but he won't be a threat to the organization anymore." As Naruto looked into those eyes, he had a small thought about whether he could also awaken the Rinnegan. He had all the necessary elements, having combined Senju and Uchiha cells, but what would happen to Naruto if Madara couldn't do it until the end of his natural life? Of course, he knew that he didn't need the Rinnegan because he could control the Gedo Mazo with just the Senju and Uchiha cells. But he needed the Rinnegan to call it up and use it. There were only 2 pairs of Rinnegan in the world at this very moment. The eyes that Nagato has, the eyes that Izuna has, and the pair that is hidden in the shadows. As long as this problem is solved, your mission is complete. You are useful to the organization after all, the Diva Path said. Nagato didn't want to admit it, but he knew that Zetsu's help was essential to getting important people like Yokaze. He had a bad feeling that Yokaze was up to something or trying to control things to suit his own purposes. Although I do understand that you have been bunkered down with missions Yokaze, I'm afraid I have another that serves the Akatsuki's purposes. They looked at Yahiko's body with confusion, because whatever he was talking about didn't have anything to do with money. Naruto just stood there and didn't say anything, even though he thought it was annoying that he had to work like a dog on mission after mission, some of which weren't even worth his time or effort. He never got to do anything that would have been better for him. Everything he did outside of the Akatsuki was for his own good and to further his plans. If he couldn't carry out his plans himself, Zetsu was always ready to help, since the plant man was so important to his plans.
Nagato had made him talk about seeing the man in person, which he didn't know, but it had to be important enough for Nagato to bring it up.
Konan also had the feeling that Nagato had something planned for her and her blonde partner. For some reason, she always felt strange when she saw Ryu. Behind his emotionless exterior and blank stare, he was hiding something he wouldn't accept, something he thought was truly lost. Maybe he didn't know about it, or maybe he just thought it was an illusion. She knew that whatever he was thinking was buried deep. Nagato was the same way, but he only told her what hurt him. No, Naruto denied that it existed. If he did, it would mean that he was admitting his pain, which he would see as weak, and his pride would not allow any kind of weakness. You've heard of the castle in Kusagakure called Hizukioho, where the worst criminals in the world are sent, Pain said as he looked out over the village and waited for Yokazi to answer. Nagato recently got information about an object that could help the Akatsuki reach their goals. He was obviously interested in the object because anything that helped him carry out his plans was good for him and only him, and it also moved him closer to his ultimate goal. Hizukio. The prison where vermin eat, shit and sleep all together. I don't see how worthless shinobi with little to no power would catch your eye, unless you wanted to experiment on them. If so, they could be worthy test subjects. I already have many experiments I want to conduct. It's not like anyone will miss them. It's not like they're wanted by the world. They're nobodies. Naruto spoke, attempting to figure out Nagato's one person Naruto couldn't read like a book was Nagato. It was like he had closed the pages on Nagato a long time ago and wouldn't open them again, just like Naruto. No. Contacts of mine have informed me that there is a certain box, buried under Hizukio. The Gokuraku no Hako, Box of Paradise. It supposedly grants any wish to those who open it, with power such as that it could further the progress of our ultimate goal and bring the world to a state I wish it to be. This is your new mission, retrieve the Gokuraku no Hako and bring it back to a Megacure. However, if you deem the box to be useless to our plans or possessing power that would be detrimental to our plan, destroy it. Kisame will be accompanying you, and Deidara will be overseeing your mission as its coordinator and will provide necessary escape for when the time is right. Said Pain as he looked back at the town, and with those words the door behind the all three opened up revealing Kisame Hoshigaki, and both of them seemed ready for the mission, even though they might have known about it earlier. Konan frowned a little at Nagato's words because he hadn't mentioned her at all while he was talking. She wondered what she would be doing while Naruto and the other two Akatsuki members were talking. Konan looked at Pain's back with amber eyes that moved over his body and asked, "And what of me? What about you?" "I don't remember mentioning you while I was talking to Yokazi," Pain said, making Konan look to the ground in obvious but still well hidden pain. The way he talked to her, as if she wasn't important, also made her mood change. Nagato had never talked to her in that way, which is why it hurt. They trusted and cared for each other more than anyone else. It sounded like they didn't need her. When she became an orphan, she already felt that way. She didn't want to be treated that way now, even though she tried to deny it. Her emotions were weak after all. You will be staying within a megacure. I'm sure the taxing nature of your assignments have been a burden upon you both mind and body. You need to rest and recover your strength. Ryu told Konan, "Don't talk to her that way." Konan snapped her head to him, and Ryu's eyes, which were narrowed a bit toward the Akatsuki leader, told the truth. "I don't think I was talking to you." Yokazi, Pain said as he looked at Ryu. Their eyes locked, and their hidden dislike for each other came out. "If you say bad things about the rest of us, we don't care because we're driven by other things, but don't treat her like that. Treat her like she's someone who wants the same thing as you. Konan deserves the same respect as any other Akatsuki agent. She may not say it right now, but she knows she doesn't want to be talked to that way. Because she's my friend." Naruto said this with a sneer on his face. "You don't respect your elders, Yokazi," Pain said, his eyes narrowing at the short man with blonde hair for being so rude. Ryu clenched his fist and said, "I respect you, but not for you." He was getting ready to attack the dead body in front of him. Naruto spoke out against Nagato, saying, "Konan is coming with me. Deidara is not needed right now. His skills and abilities are needed elsewhere. Konan will better serve the success of this mission." Her talents and abilities make her perfect for this assignment. And she's stronger than you know. No one should ever be treated like a nobody, like he was. The two were staring at each other so furiously that the air felt thick and heavy. The anger between them was so strong that it seemed to be radiating from them like an aura. When they stared at each other, Deidara took a step back because she knew something bad was about to happen. Naruto didn't respect people who treated their best friends badly. It was almost like he had been through something similar a long time ago. It was fuzzy but there. As Pain turned his back on the blonde, he spat, "Fine. Do what you want, but stay away from me," the person with the Rinnegan said as he turned his back on Naruto. Nagato wasn't trying to make Konan useless. He was just trying to keep her away from Ryu because he didn't like how close they were emotionally or professionally. Though they didn't say it, he could see it. There were things between them that they couldn't see. After saying that, Deidara sighed and left the village, realizing that he was no longer needed for the mission. He and Kisame were the first ones to leave the room, while Naruto took Konan's hand and led her out. He did this to comfort her, even though he didn't know that she still needed it. She would never say it in front of Pain, but she liked that Naruto stood up for her. She used to be so proud that no one could defend her honor, but was she changing for the better? What Naruto said wasn't meant as an insult to her. He was just protecting a friend from harm, as anyone would. They said, "Thank you," to the blonde out loud as they left the village, which made him smile a little. He also didn't know that she had something he had found in her that he still didn't know. In Kusagakure, Naruto opened a portal and told his two friends, Kisame and Konan, about his plan. In the land of fire somewhere else. When Sakura got to the capital, she went straight to her room in Inze Hosoku's mansion and settled in. When Sakura saw the mansion for the first time, she gasped. It was so big that it could easily fit over 1,000 people. This room was perfect for her because it had a window with a nice view and the sun would come in through it. At the moment, she and Inze were on their way to a party at the Palace of the Dying Flame to honor her for representing Konoha in the courts of the Land of Fire. At the party, she would meet many nobles and court officials from the Land of Fire. She will stay by Inze's side the whole time, though, because she was scared to be around such important people from politics and society. She thought about whether the daimyo would show up, but she pushed the thought out of her mind because she thought he might not show up at all and be busy running the country as expected. At the moment, Inze bought her a flowery pink kimono because she didn't have many formal clothes. Her pink hair was pulled back into a ponytail. When they got there, they were greeted by a big empty hall full of food from all over the province and other countries. There were also a lot of people wearing the most expensive and stylish clothes, and servants were ready to take care of their needs and wipe their behinds. A lot of people were already enjoying the festivities and drinking the oldest and tastiest wines while eating small but delicious foods. Sakura's eyes grew wide when she saw what she saw. She didn't know what to do in the middle of all the noise and laughter. For Inze, stay close to me, these vultures will love nothing more than to get close to you, either in your good graces or between your legs. Sakura nodded at him, which confirmed her thoughts that some of the nobles were sleazy perverts. That's what she thought when she saw some of the long looks and disgusting smiles. At that moment, she had to see everyone around her as an enemy, because they might have been hiding a knife in their robes. She couldn't hold Inze's hand because he had it tucked into his sleeves, and because his hands were so sharp, doing so would probably cut her hand open. This place is basically a battleground. If you're not careful, you'll be stabbed in the head. The amount of casualties in this place is pretty high. The conflicts of the courts have led many rich and successful men and women to lose everything within a snap of one's fingers. At the moment you have nothing to lose, but still, you will in time, therefore you'll be another soldier on the battleground. Soon after, a man in a fancy kimono showed up and invited them to his party. The nobleman said to Hosoku, "San, nice to see you again. I hope your trip to Konoha was productive." Then he looked at Sakura. A very profitable one indeed, and this beautiful specimen must be Sakura Haruno. "Welcome to my home," the man said as he kissed the top of Sakura's hand, which made her blush a little. "Many of the nobles and diplomats here are very happy about your arrival, and I hope you enjoy your time at my party. As you can see, we didn't skimp on anything. The food, drinks, and entertainment come from all 5 great nations, so if you don't find something that works for you, just let me know, and I'll make sure it happens," the man said, waving his arms around to his guests as the nobles and diplomats continued to party. "And how many people can be fed with the money that was used to pay for this party?" Inze asked the man with narrowed eyes while the noble laughed at the man with caramel hair. Please, Inze, don't give us another lecture. The peasants will never rise up because they are weak and worthless, the man said, ignoring his fellow diplomat's warnings. You forget that I'm one of the trash that crawled through the mud to get here, Inze said, and the man almost blew his nose. Well, I guess some people are just born lucky, the noble said. He clapped his hands, and a young girl with what looked like nuts appeared. The noble took a nut out of the bowl and chewed it politely. He wasn't hungry for nuts right now because he couldn't remember why. The man slapped the girl and said, "What is this poison? You stupid whore." The girl fell to the ground, and the nuts fell out of the bowl all over the place. He stomped his foot on the girl over and over to make his point clear. You can never get anything right. You're trash. And your family is trash. Maybe I'll pay that sister of yours another visit. When Sakura first saw the abuse, she yelled, "Hey, stop it." Her heart hurt from seeing the man who seemed nice do such horrible things. The host said, "Why should I? She's trash. Nothing more." Fine, my leg was getting tired anyway. He then left to take care of more guests. Sakura helped the poor girl get back up by getting down on her knees and pulling her up. As Sakura looked over the girl, who didn't look much older than her, she asked, "Are you okay?" The girl bowed to Sakura and said, "Yes, I'm fine, Haruno." "Sama, bless you." Sakura was surprised by the gesture, but the girl was going to be fine after getting a few bruises fixed by her. The girl then went to clean up, leaving Sakura with Inze. "You did a noble thing. No one here would have even noticed what was happening as they're too busy caring for themselves than for others, and what you just saw is more than less a common occurrence," said Inze as he smiled at Sakura. "I know, he would have done the same thing too, and that man, he probably wouldn't know what tired is if it hit him in the face. It's not like rain hit his body while he was hungry and thinking about whether or not he would see tomorrow, or the horror of waking up in nothing but blood." "Sorry, I was rambling again," Sakura said, looking at the host who was talking to his guests like nothing had happened. She couldn't do nothing and watch other people suffer. As a medic, her high moral standards would not allow it, and Naruto would have done the same thing, but she did it better. "Don't get too comfortable. The war around us isn't over yet. We're swimming with sharks and running with wolves. But if you're careful and watch your step, you'll walk out with both your arms. You can make enemies as quickly as a shinobi in these halls, and if you cross the wrong people, you will pay for it. And dearly. Do what I do, and you will live until tomorrow," Inze warned as he looked out at the crowd. Some people were even looking at Sakura, and he could tell she was being watched. The man with the metal clasp and the girl with the pink hair then felt a horrible presence behind them that seemed to make everyone in its range feel bad. Inze let out a small growl when he felt someone nearby, and when he turned around, he saw a rather scary looking nobleman dressed in dark clothes. He never looked her way for long, even though she was as tall as him. The noblewoman held up a glass of wine and asked, "Hello, Inze. It looks like a nice get together, don't you think?" With a scowl, Inze asked, "And whose bed have you whored your way into now? Is the sap still wanting what you gave him, or is he crying on the street over what you took from him?" He had never liked the parties he tended to because the people he hung out with were always so boring. They would talk about their money, food, and families that they didn't care about. Any reason, Inze knew it wasn't going to be fun. He had to go to the parties, though, because he was a high-ranking diplomat and didn't want his reputation to be hurt. He didn't care at all. "Come now, Inze, we're all friends here, or in the very least on Christmas card terms with one another. And this must be the beautiful flower you plucked from Konoha. Sakura Haruno, we heard so much about you, but I never expected a hidden village to have such a fine variety of beauty. Please, you must regale us with your adventures. I'm sure you're just bursting to tell us." Sakura was taken back a bit, how much they really knew about her. She had only been in the capital for a few hours, and the nervousness of the place made her shake like a baby puppy without any warmth. She also didn't think her missions were very exciting or amazing. Then Sakura mumbled, "Well, and saw another dressed woman appear out of nowhere. This one looked more like a diplomat than a noblewoman. The diplomat told the noblewoman, "Stop making fun of the girl. You'll blush the poor thing red, and besides, she can talk about how exciting it is to be a shinobi later." This made the noblewoman pout a little before she left. The diplomat then turned back to Sakura. The Konoha kunoichi could see a warmth in her eyes that almost no one else had when they were near her. "But no, really, Haruno. Sama, we're glad to have you here. I'm sure you'll be a great addition to the courts, and if you need any help, feel free to ask. In fact, I have a son about your age, I'm sure I can set something up between you two, the diplomat said with the same warm eyes. Sakura raised an eyebrow at the woman, then heard a little laughter to her side and saw Inze laughing a little. Inze said with a small smile, you know that this trick of yours never works. Also, doesn't your son have certain interests? I'm sure he wouldn't be interested in Sakura here. The diplomat huffed and pouted softly. See, there you go again ruining the fun as usual. And just because it hasn't worked so far doesn't mean it won't work in the future. It all depends on finding the right girl for him, the diplomat said as she thought about her happy life and future grandchildren. Why don't you give him a sausage? I'm sure he'd like that, Inze joked, and the diplomat laughed before slapping him on the shoulder and laughing herself before going to meet some friends. Who was that? Sakura asked as she looked at her guard in a confused way. A colleague of mine, we just so happen to have the same mind on all the troubles occurring within the Land of Fire. We've been working together for months now to quell the hostility, but it's been slow progress. But let's not think about that for the moment and try to enjoy ourselves. Spoke Inze where he walked around with Sakura in a group. Even though they weren't like the other nobles and diplomats, they did try to have fun for now. They had some sake and snacks, but other than that, it was going to be a long night for the two of them, and it didn't look like it was going to end anytime soon. Hosoku. Sama. Yelled a man in a bright orange kimono as he walked up to them and patted Inze on the shoulder without touching him. A strawberry blonde woman about his age stood next to him. I don't know if you remember me, but we met during the crisis between the Land of Spring and the Land of Fire. Inze smiled and said, how could I forget? It was clear he was lying through his teeth. He couldn't remember the person. I don't often intervene between countries and the civil problems and foreign heads of state. Wait, actually yes. It's pretty normal for me. When the diplomats and nobles asked him about it, he said the exact same thing. You remind me a lot of a young boy with yellow hair who saved my country and turned the Land of Snow into the Land of Spring. He was thinking of that boy and saying those words with a lot of affection. Not only that, but he didn't notice the sad look on Sakura's face as she stayed quiet during the greeting. That woman next to him said, who is this man? Beloved? In a rude and disgusted tone, likely because she didn't like the party or the people she was with. The man in the orange kimono said, excuse me, Hosoku. Sama. My name is Inze Hosoku, the carnivore, and this is my beautiful wife. The man's wife yelled, beloved, I need to talk to you right now about the horrible things those witches are saying. She then stormed off, leaving her husband, who was shaking and looking a little scared. The nobleman said, of course, please excuse me, Hosoku. Sama. It's nice to meet you again. Oh, and my brother is here, so it's best if you don't talk about ins or pants. He then ran after his wife. Sakura turned to Inze and asked, do you know who that is? No clue. When a scream came through the hall, they were about to take a step backwards. When Sakura was checking her ears to see if they were bleeding, Inze didn't need to know who the voice belonged to. When they both turned around, they saw a bit of a woman and her two, homely daughters standing right behind them. Oh, Hosoku. Sama, could you not have stopped my son before he fell into such depravities? He didn't really turn into an assassin. That was just a rumor to make people more afraid of him, Inze said with a sigh. He had already dealt with this family before, and he wasn't in the mood to do it now. An assassin I could handle, but this whore he slept with, she's unbearable. The horrible things she's done to our summer house to make it look nice are an outrage, said the slightly fat woman who looked like she was about to faint. Inze wouldn't care or do anything about it, though. Inze spoke with a sad face and deep sorrow. Please allow me to express my deepest condolences on the destruction of your summer home. Oh, my heart can't say it. I can't bear to think about this anymore. Good morning, Hosoku. Sama. She yelled as she left the room with her. With her daughters by her side, Sakura just shook her head at what she saw. Kind of like this did all nobles? Most of the guests were talking about their problems, what their kids did, who they slept with, or who cheated who out of a game, so it was clear that Sakura and Inze were not having a good time. It was all just boring gossiping, which is what everyone did. A woman in a blue kimono and blonde hair asked, My, I didn't think you would actually go to events like these and with this little dove of Konoha. This is very unlike you, Inze. Who spiked your drink? I wanted it to be a surprise. It's part of my plan to become the most talked about noble in the 5 great nations, Inze said with a sarcastic smile that made Sakura and the woman in the blue dress laugh at his antics. If I'm any judge, your scheme will succeed. What do you think of the party so far? My good friend, said the lady. Like any other party I've been to, this is just a reason to get drunk and sleep with anyone who will respond. I can already see some affairs happening right now, Inze said, looking around to confirm what he already thought. And yet I also get the feeling that everybody here is a moment away from tearing each other apart. Don't get between the ladies and nobles of the courts and their wine, and we shall certainly see bloodshed. And don't make eye contact either, they can sense fear, the woman said. Because Inze and the diplomat were joking around, Sakura thought, we should probably go mingle a bit more. And this must be the elegant dove you brought back from Konoha, said the lady. I can already see that men will be falling to their knees begging for her hand. With such exotic hair and gorgeous eyes, the men and women here would never have guessed that you came from Konoha. She bowed a little and said, thank you. Before she left to join the crowd, the woman said, word of advice, anyone here wearing black, white, or blue is your friend. Everyone else is a drunk jerk. Have fun. That was it. Sakura and Inze left to have some more fun at the party. The host had clowns and fire dancers come out to entertain the guests. Everyone was amazed by the show, even though they knew it cost a lot to have such high-class entertainment. Oh, Inze Hosoku. What a surprise, said Kenka, a nobleman who looked young and was Inze's worst enemy. He was Inze's biggest rival. He wore orange robes and had curly, orange, brown hair with a small beard on his chin. Cunt was the word Inze would use to describe the man. It was clear that they were out to kill each other. Both had big, strong friends and allies, but this man named Kenka was always there to follow Inze around when he did something. I see your time with the plain folk hasn't done much to convince you to leave the courts, he said. There was a young woman with oily black hair next to Kenka. That girl said, Kenka dear, please introduce me to your delicious friend. But what shocked Inze and Sakura was that the girl had a voice like a man's. The deep voice and all. Inze and Sakura both took a step back from Kenka and his associate out of fear. Kawaii, meet my biggest political enemy and the person I hate the most, a dirty peasant if there ever was one. Kenka growled at Inze, but the man ignored him while Sakura clenched her fist. This is awkward and tense at the same time. Can we talk about something else? Sakura asked Inze in a whisper. He just nodded. Inze said to Kenka, well, as much as I'd love to stay and make you laugh, I'd rather not stare at your sad face for much longer. The canapes are more interesting than this conversation, and I'm just annoyed at how upper class everyone here is. Kenka clenched his teeth and looked at the man with his hands on his hips. What an astute observation. I will see you in the courts, Inze, don't try to embarrass yourself further, we have enough peasants among us that they can dirty up this whole hall, and watch yourself too Sakura Haruno, I'm sure we will be seeing each other again. Very soon. Spoke Kenka where he left with his man talking to Lady. Sakura glared at Kenka's back as she walked away and said, I hate that cunt. Too bad, you don't get what you want, Inze said as he glared at Kenka. This time, his glare was different. It was more void and hungry for blood. And finally, they were having fun again, even though Sakura was sure she heard angry shouting outside the palace. But she didn't pay attention to it because she thought it was just in her head. Then Sakura heard a noise near the middle of the hall and looked over to see what looked like a man dressed in fancy clothes and wearing a unique hat. Next to him was a big cake that was as tall as him, and on the other side of him was a fat woman wearing a short, fancy cape and holding a crying cat to her chest. The woman and the cat had many designs and features that nobles would be familiar with. The man turned out to be the fire daimyo, and his annoying wife was named Madame Shijimi. She really didn't like these two people. They were so annoying. Thank you all for coming, Madame Shijimi said in a loud voice, but Sakura and Inze could tell something was wrong because they thought they saw flames, smoke, and angry shouting just outside the hall's windows. They looked at each other for a split second before looking out the windows again. Sakura narrowed her eyes and wondered what was going on, while Inze had a good idea of what it might be. Then they could hear even more angry yelling coming from outside the hall. It got louder as the musicians turned up the volume of their music. Even though there are jerks outside, our distinguished host, the Lord of the Hall, wants to reassure you that they can't hurt us while we're inside these walls, Madame Shijimi said without a care in the world. And to thank our host for being so polite, we will let him cut the cake, she began, but her words were cut short when a brick went through a hall window and hit Madame Shijimi in the head, killing her instantly. Her body then fell into the cake, dripping blood all over the pastry. People in the hall screamed in horror and despair at what they saw and at the dead look in the madam's eyes. Many had believed her when she said they were safe, but that was not true. The cat seemed to be kissing the brick that killed her before jumping out of a window to get away. What was going on shocked Inze and Sakura, who were just standing there as more rocks and bricks broke through the windows and arrows came flying out from inside. They quickly hid behind an upside down table as the diplomats and nobles started to run away from the deadly mortar. Soon, Kenka and his comrade, Kawai, joined them. While this was going on, the daimyo's guards led him out of the hall and to a safer place, leaving the other people in the hall to handle their own problems. The peasants are rising against us, but how? Why? Yelled one of the nobles before a stray arrow hit him in the eye and he died. Inze lifted his head off the table to get a better view and saw that the main doors of the hall were being hit over and over again by what they called peasants. We have to leave. They're crazy. They'll attack anything brightly colored, even though we're on their side. Inze yelled over all the yelling to Sakura, who just nodded and tried not to get hit in the head by the mortar. I know a way out of the hall. We need to move quickly. Yelled Inze again. Then he picked up a silver platter and held it above his head as a shield, while his three friends did the same. Kawai yelled, Kenka dear. What do we do? In a voice that sounded like a man's. Follow the mud. He knows what he's doing. I hope. Said Kenka. Soon, the four of them ran like crazy to the escape Inze was telling us about. Just then, the soldiers broke through the halls and started killing everyone with bright red weapons, just as Inze had said. They stayed away from any weapon that could hurt them and tried their best not to look back at the angry people coming at them. Even though Kenka did, which made them even more angry. They climbed a flat set of stairs by jumping up and down several steps to get where they were going. They got to the top, but Kawai tripped and fell. It was like one of those overused horror movies where the heroes always trip over things that shouldn't trip them in the first place and get killed by the bad guy. After that, she grabbed Kenka's leg. As Kawai pulled on Kenka's leg, she begged, Kenka dear, please save me. But the nobleman spread his arms out too far and said, gross peasant. He then pulled his leg away and followed Inze and Sakura. Kawai felt the peasants grab her body before she was thrown off a balcony out of the hall. When she landed in the middle of the riot, many angry citizens swarmed around her and beat and kicked her. Suddenly, a man with a sword appeared out of nowhere and cut off her head with a swift stroke. Her headless body flopped to the ground. Inze, Sakura, and Kenka were still running through the halls to get ahead of the crowd that was following them. They quickly went to the left and got close to the door. Sakura used her chakra boosted strength to break it down. Later, the three hid in another room. Inze moved a cabinet out of the way to reveal a small door that led to a tunnel that would save them and let them escape. The three of them quickly made their way through the small tunnel and emerged on the outside of the hall, on an empty street where no one had been. As they helped Sakura get to her feet, Inze could see the shadows of four people with pitchforks. As soon as the group of civilians turned the corner and saw him running toward them, Inze knew he had to do something. He wasn't scared of the approaching diplomat. The first civilian to see him was also the first to react. Before he could figure out what the threat was, Inze stepped in front of him and cut the man's throat with the metal talons on his fingers. The civilian was then spun around and faced his fellow soldiers. Because he was a bit ahead of the other three, they didn't notice that one of their teammates had been killed until he turned around and put his hand to his throat. That's when they saw the horrified look on his face and the blood running through his fingers. The other three gasped quickly when they saw what was going on. Soon, the man's body hit the ground, and Inze's outline appeared behind him, knelt on the ground, and put a metal-clad hand on the man's body. Then Inze ran forward, jumped through the air, and landed on top of another man, placing his metal-clad feet on his chest. He then stabbed the man in the neck with his metal talons, cutting off his air supply and killing him instantly. After that, someone else pulled out a knife and tried to stab Inze from above, but he wasn't very good at it because he probably only used it to cut cheese and meat. Then, Inze fought the man while catching the motion of the stabbing with his hands. At the same time, his friend rushed at him with the pitchfork, trying to gore Inze and save his friend. But Inze, who had caught the knife, killed the man with it and avoided the pitchfork with such skill that it was like he knew exactly what the man was going to do. The last citizen then turned back to face Inze and tried to stab him with the pitchfork. But Inze quickly moved to the side, grabbed the weapon with one of his deadly hands, and punched the man in the face, leaving sharp metal fragments in his face. Then Inze kicked him away, and more metal got stuck in the man's body, making him grunt in pain. Then, Inze turned the weapon around and quickly hit the man in the lungs, killing him. Kanka and Sakura, who were watching, just stood there and stared at Inze with shocked looks on their faces. Sakura was shocked by how cruel Inze was and how he treated others. When he talked about how everyone had the potential to do good, she thought he was a man who could do no wrong and who focused on his dreams and goals in a way that could only make things better. Because he was so nice, she thought he couldn't kill a fly. But it looked like Sakura was wrong about a few things. The men he just killed wouldn't have thought twice about killing her and maybe even raping her, but that didn't change the fact that Inze had just killed the people he swore to help. Then Sakura saw him mess around with the dead bodies and then take their clothes off. This made Kanka and Sakura wonder what he was doing and what it involved. Inze took off his black and white kimono and put on a dirty white shirt, a dark brown jacket, and blue jeans with holes in them. He said, "Quickly, put on their clothes, more will be coming, and we want to blend in." When Kanka crossed his arms and looked disgusted, he said, "I'm not dressing up as a peasant." Sakura ran over to Inze and quickly took off her clothes, making him feel a little better. While this was going on, Kanka could hear shouting and had beads of sweat running down his neck. To be honest, Inze didn't care if he followed his advice or not, but he thought he should if he wanted to stay alive. Putting down his stubborn pride, Kanka quickly put on some new, smelly clothes and did what everyone else did. "Let's leave this place right away. If we can make it back to the mansion, we might be safe," Sakura said as she adjusted a knit cap on her head and tucked her beautiful pink hair into it. She was wearing an overcoat that covered most of her body. With anger and frustration in his voice, Inze said, "We can't." The diplomat was asked by Sakura why that would be a bad idea. The mansion and hall were both broken into, and the mansion was quite a ways away. If the citizens found out who we were, we'd be dead anyway, so we shouldn't go back. Instead, we should meet up with some friends of mine. They'll help us, I hope. Inze said this before he started running through streets and alleys that weren't full of people. They quickly and carefully made their way through the city's maze. Inze knew that what was happening wasn't just a coincidence. He believed that other forces were at work. Getting the people to rise up against their oppressors sounded like a great story, but Inze had to wonder if the organization he was going to had anything to do with it. He didn't think so because his friends weren't the type to stay out of trouble. They were more than happy to do the dirty work. As the rioters' yells got closer, Sakura quickly ducked into an alley that led nowhere. There, she saw the headman, who was big, bald, and had ripped clothes and a mean look on his face. Then she saw what she thought was a flower on the door. It was faded and some of the mark was gone, but she was sure it was a flower. Did Inze take them to a speakeasy? She didn't know what to think about this. Out of thousands of shinobi, she had been chosen to represent Konoha, but on her first day on the job, well, technically she hadn't been involved in politics yet, so she hadn't even started. People were already trying to kill her. Looking back, she could see flames and smoke rising all over the city. The riot had spread everywhere, and the screams and shouts were enough to stop anyone. Was this supposed to happen? Didn't this happen that should have? To be honest, none of this should have happened at all. The group had already arrived at that point. The big man, who looked about 8 feet tall, crossed his arms and stared down at all three of them. The big man asked, "Invitation?" Kanka and Sakura shook their heads a little at his scary appearance. The tone of Inze's voice changed, making it sound like he had no feelings at all. It was like he had gone into a void and been spit out again. Petals fall and die. When night fades and becomes black. Only then will our true dreams become real and absolute. Sakura raised an eyebrow at the change in tone. The big man gave him a nod and opened the door. He looked at the other two people with caution. It was the big man who said, "She knew to expect you." He led Inze and his followers through the door and then shut it behind him. Now they were walking through a small tunnel with leaking pipes and wet ground. As they walked, they could hear waves splashing against the ground, which led to a place they didn't know. They soon came into a big metal hall with a cold, dense feeling in the air. Weapons decorated and lined every wall that could be seen, every weapon possible. The hall was empty, but Sakura could feel that someone was watching them with cold eyes that didn't show anything. In the hall, there were also 4 banners with what looked like lotus flowers made of black and red flowers. Sakura didn't know what any of this meant to her, but she had to ask how Inze knew about the people watched them. Well, this is rather due. Kenka said, bored with what he saw, until he felt a sword to his throat and saw a man to his right wearing a strange mask and armor and carrying very sharp katanas. He couldn't say anything else. When Kenka looked into the man's eyes, all he saw was a black hole. Soon, more dropped all around them, enclosing them and making it impossible for them to get away. They were all dressed the same, with the same masks, armor, and swords. Inze had to mentally slap himself for being so stupid around Kenka. You should never make a sound or move when you're around these people. Even the tiniest movement made them react instinctively, and they weren't even Kenka's biggest fans. They could smell the disgusting smell of a higher class person in the cologne he was wearing. Sakura did what Inze did and didn't say or do anything while the mysterious people in black watched her. Someone spoke from above and said, the slug was breathing so heavily that we could have killed him in the dark. The person wearing the voice had blood. Red leather dress armor that looked like it was from the time of the samurai and a black bodysuit that only showed her collarbone and head. She had a purple obi around her waist and 2 katanas on her back, with a red bandana around her jet. Black hair. Her steel, sharp green eyes looked into the souls in front of her. With a small smile, Inze said, "Hello Karai." Karai slapped him across the face, leaving a red hand shaped mark on his face. He started to say more, but was quickly stopped when she hit him again. Kenka tried not to laugh at the scene, but Sakura was shocked by what was happening and how disrespectful it was. Her mother had told her that men could be pigs, so maybe Inze was one of those men. But she couldn't help but wonder what his relationship with Karai was like. After seeing what happened, Sakura said, "I'm guessing you didn't deserve that." She looked a little confused. Inze turned back to Karai, who was staring at him, and said, "No, I definitely deserve that." He then turned back to Sakura. "It's a long and complicated tale, let's just say, someone of her price. You need more than 2 chickens. What do you want, Inze? If you're looking for the Shogun, warlord, then he's not here, he's attending to some business. And won't be back for some time. Unless you have business with the Kokorin, Black Lotus, directly, if so, the price will be hefty, and the Shogun will certainly not approve. Tedious tasks are not our area of expertise." Karai spoke with a cryptic voice that deceived awe. As Karai looked at him with narrowed eyes, Inze said, "I know the Shogun isn't here, and I'm sure he won't mind if we hire your services. Don't worry, we're more alike than you think. Some might even say I know him better than anyone else. But you're the only one who can help." She then raised her hand and made a fist. The Kokorin soldiers backed off a bit, put their swords back in their sheaths, and took a few steps away from the group. "What do you need? Speak quickly," Karai asked as she left the group and went down some stairs, where more Kokorin soldiers appeared and started to line up in a formation. Sakura thought there were at least 100 soldiers in the room and wondered if there were more Kokorin members that she didn't know about. Karai heard Sakura's needs when she decided to speak up for Inze. "We need to get back to our mansion because the citizens may raid it, and if they do, we need protection because there are too many angry citizens, and I'm told not to hurt them," Sakura said. Inze nodded, and Karai turned her head to look at her as she walked, which Sakura thought meant she was checking her out. Karai then stopped in her tracks, held out her right arm to the side, and clenched her fist. 20 Kokorin members then vanished from view. Then Shen held out her left hand and flicked her wrist, making 20 others disappear. Karai pulled something off her body and said, "Done. Oh, and take this." It was 2 seals tags that were hidden inside her armor. "Leave. Also, I want payment in cash. We'll be in this location for 3 more days before we meet with the Shogun's second in command. Until then you better have payment. The Kokorin always pay their debts and so should their clients." Inze, Sakura, and Kenka did what she said and quickly disappeared back the way they came, but this time they were accompanied by a Kokorin shinobi. Inze put 2 seals on Sakura and Kenka's foreheads when they left. These sealed them off from what they had seen for 15 minutes. Soon, the three of them were on their way to Inze's house. Inze had a sickly grin on his face, and his brown eyes would flash from brown to red with Tomo in them every once in a while. In a small cafe near Kusagakure, there were two people wearing black cloaks with red clouds on them. One of them had golden, spiked, blonde hair that fell between his eyes and split at the bridge of his nose. He also wore his hair in a low, spiked ponytail that was wrapped in tight bandages. His eyes were blood red from the Tomo inside them, and he looked like he had no feelings. The other man was clearly taller and had a muscular build. He looked a lot like a shark, with blue gray skin, small, round, white eyes with gill-like facial markings under them, and sharp, triangular teeth. Hair that is dark blue and styled into the shape of a shark's fin. Ryu Yokaze, Naruto Uzumaki, and Kisame Hoshigaki were both sitting in a small cafe. One was enjoying a delicious cup of green tea, while the other was devouring the roast lamb he had ordered like an animal, actually, more like a shark, while his partner looked at him with disgust in their red eyes.
The man with blonde hair asked, "Do you really have to eat your food with such
vigor?" As he sipped more tea and watched his date gulp down more meat. As Kisame joked, "Well, they say sharks are the garbage cans of the ocean. They eat just about anything. And I like to think of myself as not that different from them, so if you don't mind, I would like to enjoy my meal, unless you're on the menu." Yokaze raised an eyebrow at the man. The shark man didn't remember that Naruto left him close to death the last time they fought. Besides, are you sure this plan will work? As Naruto sipped his tea and looked out the window, he said, like pouring oil on fire. "Might want to finish that meat of yours. You might not get a good meal for a few weeks." Soon, the cafe's windows were broken, and shinobi from Kusagakure rushed in. Many of the customers started screaming and falling off their tables, and the shinobi started arresting everyone they saw, except for two men sitting in the corner. Naruto said that corner was the most suspicious, so that's where they would look. The shinobi saw them enjoying their lunch in less than 5 seconds. They were dragged to the ground quickly, and their cups and plates broke into many pieces as they hit the ground. Naruto then felt a leg grab the back of his neck and hold him down. He then felt his hands being tied together. "You're being arrested," Ryu Yokaze and Kisame Hoshigaki, one of the shinobi, told the two Akatsuki members as they were pinned to the ground. Naruto gave a small smirk when he saw that his plan worked, and Kisame gave him a mean smile. As he lifted them and dragged them out of the cafe, the shark man said, "It worked." 2 wooden cages were waiting for them outside. As soon as they got into them, they sat down and tried to get comfortable for the trip ahead. While in the trees, she wore the same black coat that Naruto always wore. She had blue hair and amber eyes, and she disappeared into the trees, knowing that her job wasn't done. Now, they were on a rickety old rowboat that was rocking back and forth because of the rough waves and strong currents in the lake that surrounded their destination. They were careful not to hit any of the razor-sharp rocks that could have pierced their boat and torn through their only defense. They could hear thunder hitting the sky above them as the rain hit them hard. Kisame did nothing but mumble in his wooden cage about how badly the people were bothering him and how much his butt hurt. Naruto, meanwhile, looked up into the sky through the holes in his wooden cage. He seemed mesmerized by the lights in the sky, which came from the lightning fluttering around. He also looked fed as the rain hit his face, dripped down the sides of his cheeks, and soaked his hair. His clothes and hair were stuck to his body tightly, making him look like he was in a state of euphoria. There was something about storms that made him feel like he was born in them. During storms, he would sometimes just stand there and watch them. It was almost like the clouds and the thunder were calling to him to be among the clouds, free from everything and everyone that held him down. He wanted to fly among the clouds and fight the lightning. One of the rowers looked back at Naruto and Kisame and said, "It looks like those prisoners, or should I say garbage, will have some new meat to play with. Wonder how long they'll last before they break. Don't know about them, they're supposed to be some big shots. But they won't be getting out anytime soon, no one escapes Hazukiyo. It's impossible," one of the rowers said. This time, a guard looked at the two S-level criminals and said, "I heard there's one way." One of the guards laughed and said, "Really?" Through a body bag. Naruto and Kisame didn't pay attention to them, but they were mad that the guards took their Akatsuki cloaks. One of the Akatsuki was still mumbling, and the other was still staring up at the stormy sky. Soon, they were able to see their goal, Hazukiyo, through the mist and hazy fog. A huge castle built on a cliff that housed murderers, rapists, and the worst bad guys the world had to offer. Naruto knew that he could always escape. No prison was ever impossible to escape. It was just hard. The castle was big, with thick walls that no one could physically jump over, a lot of big guard towers that could see any kind of escape, and a view that didn't leave many blank spots. In all honesty, it looked more like the home of a powerful clan during the time of the warring clans. It had enough space for many people to live and protect them from outside forces. The two criminals were then taken off the boat and met by 8 men wearing ponchos and straw hats. They quickly grabbed the wooden cages and carried the 2 criminals to Hazukiyo, though Kisami's 4 carriers had some trouble getting used to his weight. Naruto noticed that the storm had stopped as they walked past trees and bushes on their way to the castle. He also saw that there were many plants with red flowers growing around the castle. The ground was good for the flowers to grow on. Soon, both sides stopped in front of a door that had symbols of all 5 great hidden villages on it. This meant that the prison was for all 5 villages, not just Kusagakure. The 2 men in their cages were soon dropped over white circles where many guards with drawn weapons stood before them. The guards had stiff faces and bodies. Then, a fat guard that Naruto thought looked like Akamichi stepped out from the bodies, jiggling his big gut, which made everyone, even Kisame, very angry. The man who was swollen yelled, "Attention!" even though no one else was looking. Naruto, who was locked up, only made his cell smaller because he could feel a strong source of anger and hatred nearby, and it was coming quickly. Now then, new arrivals. Listen up and remain silent. Mui. Sama. The master of Hazukiyo will now speak and address you. Soon, the fat man moved out of the way to let the person he was talking about come forward. He wore burgundy robes with yellow tassels off his shoulders and a long black cape that covered most of his body. He had silver belt around his waist and black eyes that looked right through you. Naruto narrowed his own eyes even more. He knew those eyes belonged to someone who had lost everything except their life. Those eyes told him that there was nothing further than what he had lost. They say that the eyes are the windows to the soul, and Naruto could see his own perfectly. The most dangerous people in the world had those eyes. This man is the cause of the hate he felt earlier. My name is Mui, and I am the master of Hazukiyo. Let me explain your situation. No matter what you were in your past lives, the fact that you were sent here means that you are no longer useful to anyone. You have lost the trust of your village and people, and you are seen as a threat to the peace and stability of your village. From now on, you are all worthless, Mui said as he walked up to Naruto and Kisami's wooden cages and took off a seal on one of the cages. Mui spoke to Naruto while he looked at the criminals lined up and said, "I'm sure you've heard the terrible rumors about our little house. Well, I just want to tell you, they don't have to be true. As long as you do everything I say." Naruto kept staring at the ground while Mui spoke, "Look me in the eye when I'm talking to you." Naruto didn't answer. But Mui didn't answer when Naruto said, "No." He kept staring. He put his foot on Naruto's chains and forced him to the ground and on his knees. "Oh, so you'd rather look at my shoes? Then take a look," Mui said. Although Mui was using scary moves, Naruto didn't change his expression or body language. He still wasn't scared. "I know exactly who you are. You are Ryu Yokazi, the Yokazi no Ryu, dragon of the night wind. You seem to have this false sense of invincibility. But don't worry, we'll get rid of that in time. Now look me in the eye," Mui said. Naruto did what he was told and turned his head so that his Sharingan eyes met Mui's. Mui wasn't afraid of Naruto's eyes, which were bred for battle. "See, isn't that better? You will all do as I say or you will pay a price." Then Mui took Naruto's foot off of the chains, letting him stand up straight. Naruto never took his eyes off of Mui's form. No one knew it, but a woman with white hair, gray eyes with ripples, and a green bandana on her head was watching from where she was standing. The villages of the world gave Kusagakure the mission to never let anyone they send to the castle escape alive. "Your personal problems are none of our business, and we couldn't care less about them," Mui said, making a seal with his palm and thrusting it forward to hit Naruto in the chest. Mui's palm caught fire. Kaden. Tenro, fire release, heavenly prison. Naruto then felt a shock go through his chest. He gasped, fell to his knees, and curled over a bit. He had learned to fight pain, but what he was feeling had to hurt if it was making him kneel down. That way of putting people in jail is unique to my clan and has been passed down through the generations. That's why Kusagakure was chosen to watch over Hazukiyo and its prisoners. As long as you wear that seal, you won't be able to shape your chakra, Mui said. Naruto grabbed the zipper on his black cloak and pulled it down, showing the seal underneath. There are only 2 ways to leave this place. The first is for your village to officially request your release. The second and by far the most common is by dying. And don't think of escaping. If you get beyond a certain reach from me, the Tenro will activate and burn you into ash. One more thing, and while we're at it, you may have heard that the Tenro is ineffective when underwater. This is true, but the surrounding lake is deep and the currents are treacherous. If you were to jump in, you would drown long before you can infuse your chakra. We're done here, get them out of my sight. Mui spoke, but just as he was about to turn around, he approached Naruto where he stood inches near him. He then said, "We'll also be seeing each other very soon." Naruto Uzumaki. Mui turned around, not noticing Naruto's shocked and scared face. Any doubts Naruto had about the Lord of the Castle were confirmed when Naruto's cursed seal showed up on the Lord's arm and started throbbing very hard during the whole conversation. When he first looked at the man, the seal showed up, which is why he wouldn't look at him. Doing so would only prove that he was linked to the seal in some way. What they really were 5 seals, 1 for each mark. Naruto knew he had a history with this man, but he couldn't remember seeing or hearing anything like this before. Until he broke the seal on his arm, he didn't know what to think. That couldn't happen until he found the person who had put it on him and took it off. But he knew he was linked to Root because the agents who swarmed him in a megacure were proof that he had worked with them before. In order to find out who he was, he had to break the seal and learn more. Later, the guards took him and Kisame away to be looked at. They were walking when the big man spoke up again. As the Mui Sama explained, "You lose any chance of escaping when he's burned his technique into you, so you're not getting out alive, so might as well get used to staying here for a very long time." "Well, this place is pretty once you get used to it," said the man as they kept walking through the jail. Soon, they got to the cells, which were made of wood all the way through. The prisoners quickly pressed against the wood to look at their new friends. The fat man held out his arms to all the other prisoners and said, "Look, your fellow prisoners are giving you a warm welcome. Hey, tasty meat." These guys look like a bunch of pussies. There was no way for Naruto to answer that. "Give me the blonde guy. He looks like fun. Let's have a good time together. Thank you for coming to hell. First, you have to go through a physical exam before you can go into your cells, which are your new home. That's all of you." The man told them as they walked through the prison, "I'll search every part of your bodies and give you a really thorough physical exam." They were now sitting on metal benches in a metal hall while they were being questioned by guards. Naruto and Kisame were sitting together when their chains were finally taken off. Kisame groaned in pain, but Naruto was thinking about Mui and how he was connected to the man. Someone new who was sitting next to Naruto looked at the man with blonde hair. "Okay, what are you up to?" asked the man as Naruto turned his eyes to look at him from the sides and gave him a mean look. The man backed away a little out of fear. "Oh well, I guess I'll never know. I was given a mission, and I messed it up pretty badly. I was told to kill everything in sight from a nearby village. But in a weak moment, I let this one kid go because I felt sorry for him, and when my village found out, they sent me here." The prisoner spoke, getting Kisami's attention while Naruto kept staring at him from the corner of his eyes. "Didn't it feel good to kill all those people? Their blood on you, cries of mercy," Kisame said with another sick and shark-like grin. The prisoner moved closer to Naruto to talk to Kisame more. Hell yeah, it felt good. They were practically crying, wetting, and shitting themselves at the same time. "And just making them shut up from all the screaming was good too," he replied. Kisame smiled and said, "I think we're going to be good friends." "So got any other stories?" "Because there was that one time I had to massacre." Naruto blocked out everything and didn't pay attention to what was going on around him. He did feel like someone was watching him, though, and when he turned around, he saw a woman with white hair that was held back with a striped green bandana. She had gray eyes that looked like the Rinnegan, and she wore a sleeveless kimono over her clothes. "You know why we're both here, right?" The woman said, Hazukiyo is a miserable hive of villainy for those who have lost all the faith their village had in them. Naruto just stared at her, his Sharingan off because of the seal showing his ocean blue eyes. I know what you are, and you know what I am. We both have different reasons for being here, and it's only a matter of time before we figure out what we're both after. People who steal things and kill people are just bad people. They have no reason to do what they do. But we're not either, so can we explain what we did? The woman went on, and we can never run away from who we are. Naruto stayed quiet and listened, and everything she said was true. I saw you in the bandana. You're awake. One of the guards said. The woman said, if you know what kind of place you're in, when you look around and see you're in a deep hole, it's time to stop digging. So she did. After a short while, it was Naruto's turn to be checked out. The same fat man that was rubbing his second chin told Naruto to get undressed. Naruto did as he was told and took off all of his clothes, including his cloak, pants, gloves, and boots. The guard said there were no weapons in the clothes because they were looking in the wrong place. Now jump on each leg one at a time. This time, Naruto didn't do what the man said and instead stared at him. Oh, so you're a feisty one, eh? Well then GU. That's right, the fat man said as he got up from his chair and walked up to Naruto. He looked like he was ready to hit him with his baton, and the other two guards did the same. As one of the guards tried to hit Naruto, he grabbed the man by the arm and threw him over his shoulder, hitting the table so hard that the man almost choked on his food. He then kicked the other guard in the gut so hard that he almost threw up. The fat man then tried to hit Naruto with the baton, but the blonde charged up a fist and broke it on impact. She then grabbed the broken baton from the air and pressed it against the fat man's throat, where some blow. Do not forget. I can kill you, Naruto said as he threw the broken baton to the ground and changed into his black cloak. The fat man had a wet spot between his legs that could be seen. Mui meanwhile was looking out across the massive lake as the sun was beginning to set. He was thinking about the resurgence of Naruto Uzumaki. He was able to remember the boy so well that he recognized him even without his characteristic whiskers. He remembered how he hired Danzo to improve the security of Hazukiyo, and he sent Naruto, or by his codename back then, Tekurufu, to create specific seals for Hazukiyo while as a guest at the castle. It was fair to say that he was close to the boy, so close that Naruto revealed his real name to him. Naruto reminded Mui so much of his lost son Muku from their obsession to ramen and their sprightly personalities. They were a lot alike in that regard. Mui had also believed that Naruto had died at the Valley of the End. He believed the reports and the rumors. He had hoped that the boy was alive, but he gave up hope 6 months after the news had spread. He wouldn't say it, but he would keep tabs on the blonde-haired boy when he left route under specific conditions. While he couldn't become involved in the boy's life, it didn't mean that he wasn't watching over him. If Mui had tried anything, he could have caused an international incident, something Kusagakure didn't need. But Naruto talked about the deplorable way people treated him, and Mui did his best as a guardian angel. If he was alive, then he would be okay. After all those years, he was back, but he wasn't the same. His eyes looked dead, and everything else about him was different, too. Mui couldn't explain it, but Naruto was a product of what this world could do to people. He then heard footsteps behind him and knew who it was. Mui told his attacker, Moroi, things have changed, the plan needs to be changed, but still, the time is near, retrieve him unharmed. Moroi quickly left, leaving Mui looking over his shoulder with a frown on his face before turning back to look at the huge lake. It was now dark in Hazukojo, and many of the prisoners had already been put into their cells. Naruto was separated from Kisame soon after they were put into their cells. The only light coming from the candles flickering on the walls. Most of the prisoners and guards were asleep, their dreams coming true as they slept. Naruto was sleeping in his cell, not dreaming of anything because he couldn't dream. He didn't notice that the door to his cell opened a little while he was still like a statue in a courtyard. When he finally jumped out of bed, he felt a hard pressure against his neck, which knocked him out. He fell back to sleep, but his attacker was still hovering over him. He'll be able to sleep well on his first night here. The Moroi said, this guy's either a big shot or a big idiot. He then blindfolded Naruto's eyes, gagged his mouth with a cloth, and bound his legs and arms. He quickly left, but before anyone knew it, a single ember flew into Naruto's cell and lit it up. It then flew up to a nearby corner on the roof of the cell and shone in his face, showing off his features with his burning Sharingan eyes glowing in the dark. At the same time, the Naruto they took was being held down in a small lab. There were power circuits and vials on the tables and walls, and electricity was buzzing around. Naruto was tied to a table with strong bands, making it hard for him to move. Mui turned his cold eyes on the young man who was struggling against his confines. He felt bad about what he was doing. Moroi took off his hooded cloak and complained that it made him feel like he was suffocating. Mui didn't pay attention to him because he was looking at the young man he used to know. Soon, Moroi undid Naruto's cloak's zipper, revealing his bare, muscular chest. But Mui, being as smart as he was, saw something was wrong and gave Moroi a sharp gaura, which made him blush a little. Mui then pulled out a kunai and gutted Naruto in the chest, stopping him from screaming and making him burst into smoke from the pain. Before leaving the lab and telling his guards about the escape, Mui told Moroi, "You stupid fool." At that very moment, Naruto was trying to get away, but he had a secret reason. He was moving so quickly through the other cells that the other prisoners didn't even notice or feel him because they were too busy sleeping. Soon, Naruto saw a big hole in the roof above the guard's desk and the statue of the. Moving up and jumping through the hole, he didn't bother to check to see if the guard was awake because he was so good at sneaking that the guard wouldn't be able to find him. Once he was through the hole in the roof, he flipped the hood on his cloak and snuck off into the night. He had to meet with someone, and even though he could make one clone, he had to figure out how many clones he could make while under the effects of the Tenro. Besides that, he knew there were hidden trapdoors on the roof because the hole in the roof he used to escape was meant to be there so that any prisoner who tried to escape would really meet an unexpected end so soon. Because he could hear very well, he could hear the guards' feet moving around looking for him. He could also hear the dogs' growls, which meant they were trying to smell him. He would have to move quickly before the dogs found him. Naruto said as he formed a seal he had used many times before, "Guess there's no other choice. With so many guards and this seal on me, it won't be easy getting to the rendezvous unless I keep the guards' attention on me." "Are we sure we found him?" "No sir, he's elusive, but the dogs will find him soon." The guards then saw the blonde tumbling down the roofs of the buildings. He looked tired and sweaty, and he landed in a mess on the ground with his bangs covering his eyes. As soon as the dogs saw their prey, they rushed over and started biting him on the arms, legs, and body, tearing his cloak in several places, like on his shoulders and arms. The guards then came running over and lit up the downed man with their flashlights. "They caught him already? Is this guy really an S-ranked criminal? I thought he'd put up more of a fight or run away," Moroi said as he leaned against the wall of Mui's office. The man staring into the flame of a candle, on the other hand, knew how sneaky Naruto was and knew that whatever Naruto did, he did on purpose and wanted to be caught, though Mui didn't know why. This proved to Mui that Naruto was the rules and regulations say that he should be locked up alone in the disciplinary cell for 3 days. "You know that will set our plans back 3 days, and he can't be reached while he's in there. One or more of the guards may be grass fruit spies." Before leaving, Mui looked into the flame for a few more seconds. He left Moroi in his office with a small smile on his face. Outside the castle, on cliffs not too far from the castle, Naruto stood and looked at the crashing waves and raging torrents with red eyes. He was waiting for someone important to him. After Naruto's failed attempt to escape, the blonde made Kage Bunshin during the escape. The real Kage Bunshin stayed in Hazukiyo, while the clone waited at the rendezvous point because it wasn't affected by the Tenro. Not knowing when. Then he caught a glimpse of a figure in the corner of his eye. It was a woman, clearly, with a slim build and black gloves that matched his own. She was wearing the same black cloak as him, with a high collar and a long zipper that went all the way along it but only went up to the knees, while his was zippered from the collar to the waist. The cloak also had silver drawstrings with silver beads hanging from them. "It's good that you came," Naruto told the woman as she took off the hood of her new cloak and showed off her blue hair in a bun with an origami flower pinned in it. On her left band were blue scaled flower hair clips, and her amber eyes were piercing and striking. With a small smile, Konan said to Ryu, "You almost sound relieved." Ryu just smiled back. Naruto asked her about the cloak he made for her, which had the same seals as his own. "How are you liking it?"
"It will protect you from all kinds of detection, not just sight, sound, and smell," he said.
"It's more comfortable than I thought," Konan joked with a smile. "Have you found the box?" "Yes, it's buried under Hazukiyo." I could feel a lot of chakra below the castle, along with a strong feeling of hopelessness and hatred emanating from where the chakra came from when I first arrived and interacted with my surroundings. It's definitely here, but I don't have the time or patience to go after the box myself. What's worse, I think Kisame has made friends with the prisoners and is now spending a lot of time with them. It's gross to see them telling stories about their worst missions, Naruto said as he looked back at the castle. Why don't you take the box? They don't know that we know it exists and where it is, Konan asked as she tried to figure out Ryu's point of view. But getting to the box is hard. I'd rather wait for it to appear and then grab it hard. There have been strange movements among the guards and some of the prisoners, and I've even seen spies from other villages. So far, none of them have told their villages that Kisame and I are there, but I don't think they'll have to wait long. They're clearly getting ready for something. At this point, we don't know if it's the two competing groups fighting over the box, a bid between the villages to take the box, or a plan to sell the box to the highest bidder. Naruto talked about how many thoughts were going through his head and how Mui knows him as well. If he marked the box as dangerous, he would destroy it. Pain won't agree with destroying the box unless it poses a threat to the Akatsuki or a Megacure, Konan told Naruto, who nodded. But still, you're right about the villages. Word will spread soon that you're being locked up. You have no more than a month before the villages take action and come for you in Kisame. Until then, don't do anything stupid. I'll stay out of sight for a while and watch the village's movements, Konan said, which made Naruto nod. Are you okay? Asking in a worried voice. Konan said, yeah, I just felt dizzy for a moment. Maybe I've been working too hard. She then felt another wave of dizziness hit her until it slowly left her body. She thought she was going to fall over, which she did when she lost her balance. She braced herself for the impact but felt a strong arm across her back and another across her chest. She saw Ryu holding her form with his Sharingan off, which let her see his soft blue eyes. She got back on her feet and steadied herself with his help. I should find a place to rest, she said. Nod, Naruto replied. Then her body broke up into many paper butterflies, and Naruto's clone vanished in a cloud of smoke. The real Naruto, on the other hand, was in the cell for discipline, sitting with his legs crossed and his hands on his knees. He then felt memories coming from his clone, where he smiled. Naruto said, things are falling into place. Right, it's time to work on this new technique. He was in a perfect spot where nothing could bother him, so he pulled up the sleeve on his right arm and bit into it, drawing blood and letting it drip onto his hand. He then clapped both hands together and closed his eyes, focusing on getting good at this new technique. In the Land of Fire capital, at Inze Hosoku's mansion, the owner of the mansion was walking through the halls on his way to the kitchen. It had been a busy day for him with the riot and his dealings with the Kokorin, but it had also been exciting. He didn't feel tired at all. He felt like he could do that over and over for a month. While Sakura quickly went to sleep, she wanted to forget about the day and what happened, even though some of her memories were messed up from her time with the Kokorin. Kanka was properly kicked out of the house when he was no longer needed. Also, the Kokorin soldiers who had led the three of them back to the mansion were still sneaking around the area without being seen. He had to keep the Kokorin a secret because it was important to him. But when he got to the kitchen, he didn't even look at the person sitting on a chair next to a table and staring at him with blood red eyes. They were watching his every move, muscle, and breath. The person sitting in the dark had his hood down on his black cloak, so only very sharp eyes could see his golden hair in the moonlight. As Inze took a glass from his cabinet, he became aware of someone in his kitchen. He couldn't have been blind to the man's presence because his aura filled the whole mansion. Inze could also feel that the air was tight and the temperature had dropped. It would have been hard to breathe for someone who wasn't used to the thick air, but he had been dealing with that person for months. Still, everything was going well for all of them. There had been no deaths or accidents yet. As he poured water into the glass he had just picked up, Inze said, "Glass of water." The man with blonde hair didn't seem impressed or was too focused on his goal to care in the least. As soon as Inze sat down at the table, the full moon light got brighter, revealing Naruto Uzumaki's face for a split second. His Sharingan eyes turned bright red. "Hi, Hosoku. Sama. That's all for tonight. See you tomorrow," said a maid who stood by the door to the mansion around the corner. "Alright, see you tomorrow, good night." Inze spoke, determined not to wake Sakura up. He then turned back to Naruto, who was still staring at him blankly. Inze knew that the blonde wasn't happy with the diplomat's progress. Naruto had spent too much time and energy helping the man and still nothing had changed. The blonde was both patient and impatient. He was willing to wait for Inze to make his move, even though he didn't want to.
There were clear signs when he looked at you with his eyes slightly narrowed and his Sharingan glowing.
Of course, he sent a Kage Bunshin. Since our connection was cut off not long ago, he sent you to pass on any information. I can say that all of your work to stop the unrest in the Land of Fire has been helpful, but it's not enough. Our Kokorin soldiers have been doing what they can, but we need to get more people involved. I think you already know what to do, so why am I asking? We'll have to move our plans forward and change your direct orders for now, until we can fix the mess you made. Until then, just keep doing what you're doing. Please look at the files that are on my table. Naruto then looked at a couple of files that didn't have the same name. Inze opened the files for Naruto while his blood red eyes looked over the paper and his body didn't move at all. He knew what this meant, killing the weakest so the strong could live. The files had the names of many nobles and diplomats, each of whom was a threat to Inze and Naruto's plan. There was Kenka and his family, the daimyo and his family and closest friends, many delegates and diplomats, and the spies of everyone who plays the great game of shadows and lies. Whether you win or lose, you might just die. Naruto then looked at the last file. The look in his eyes told the truth. This person was important to him in this life and in the next. They were the person he loved without any form or emotion. Was the last name on the list. The representative from Konoha is Sakura Haruno. All of them have to be killed, and I know Sakura has to die too, even though it hurts me. But not until we reach our goal. Only after, unless we can persuade them, Inze said, which made Naruto look back at him. Kill their families too, you can't let anyone keep doing their family work, Inze said. Naruto's blank stare was taken as a yes from the man. However, Naruto just sat there with his eyes fixed and his body stiff. That told Inze everything she needed to know that Naruto would handle everything that would happen. She also had a good idea of what Naruto would do because they were the same person. The same maid from before came out from around the corner while Inze was drinking his water. The young maid told Hosoka, "I'm sorry, I left my wallet here." She said this as she saw Inze and Naruto sitting at the table. It was making her crazy to think about what was going on, and she felt like she was in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Oh, I wish you had knocked," Inze sighed as he strafed his right arm at the maid. Before she could even make a sound, two feather-shaped daggers went through her body, landing with a thud and leaving her motionless. Naruto was unfazed by the violent murder. Such a shame, things have gotten out of hand. The daimyo is still lining his pockets with the people's money, taxes are going up, poverty is getting worse, and riots, deaths, and rape are commonplace. He has very little power left in the courts and among the nobles after what happened the day before. I doubt he has many friends and allies left in the courts because they don't want to lose their jobs or money like many others have. Most of Inze's friends were staying at his mansion, which was one of the few safe places away from the panicked civilians. They were all sitting in chairs in Inze's office, while he sat at his desk and rubbed his metal-clad hands across the hard, brown wood of his desk. The riot from the night before had been over for a whole day. Everyone in the room would have been lucky to be alive if they hadn't found ways to escape and blend in with the crowd. However, that didn't mean that none of the other nobles got away unscathed. Some even lost their heads. The daimyo was one of the lucky few to get away with the help of his personal samurai guard. Many of the other nobles who had made it out alive were too scared to leave their homes. They didn't have the courage to stand up and face their problems, so they thought that their money would protect them from getting their heads cut off. In fact, the rioters might have used their money as an excuse to do just that. It was clear that many of Inze's colleagues agreed with him when he said, "The daimyo is an incompetent bigot who treats the great game of the courts like a childish game of hopscotch. Unless drastic action is taken now, the Land of Fire is doomed." Most of the other diplomats didn't see a threat until it was burning them like fire. If they were being honest, they should have done something much sooner. They could have persuaded the daimyo to do the right thing and get the country out of the trouble it was in. I have called for a vote in the courts, one that will decide the fate of the country and its free peoples. Either it is restored to the peaceful balance it once had, or will burn in flames and be consumed by the other countries, in their lust for power. Another diplomat with her own opinion on the matter said, "But even if this vote of yours works, change won't happen in the snap of your fingers. These things take time. The best we can do is keep the economy from crashing upon us. It's best if we give in to the needs of the citizens, calming them down from their anger and their desires. Inze and Sakura just shook their heads at her. If we were to do that, it will be like feeding a stray cat. If we do give in to their demands, the only thing we will be accomplishing is the fact that the citizens will have a voice in the courts. Although that may sound like a noble trait, those who have not played the game always do end up in the ground with their families mourning around them. The more we give in to their demands, the more they will demand from us. We have to have a staunch defense against them and be unmovable like a mountain when the wind blows. Rebuked Inze, and the fellow diplomat nodded in knowing, as such a thing could hurt them. What I suggest is for a new, strong leader to keep the bureaucrats and the citizens in check, a leader with a guiding hand and with the right intentions. This leader would have to be someone who is loved by the courts and the civilians, one who is popular and knowledgeable in the affairs of the world. A different nobleman, who was enjoying a glass of wine brought by Inze's new servant, said, "It almost sounds like you're suggesting yourself, old friend." "Oh please, it's not as if I want to be the new daimyo. I would be bored out of my mind. What I'm saying is that we need someone more suited to lead the country, that's all. We could call for a vote of no confidence in the daimyo, given the fact that his own resume is not that suited for the position. Oddly enough, I don't remember how he became the daimyo, when all he cares about is whether or not light is shining out of his ass," said Inze, and many of the other nobles agreed. Sakura, on the other hand, looked tense, almost like she didn't agree with what Inze was saying. "But he's been my village's strongest supporter, both after and before the joint invasion of Otogakure and Tsunagakure. He's provided us with the funds needed to keep our village plentiful and strong. I highly doubt that the person to be the next daimyo will be as generous as himself." Sakura said this to make a point. "Even so, our village is the only thing protecting the country from outside forces and other villages. I will repeat the words I used for your master and tell them to you straight out, Sakura," Inze said, almost with a frown. "The daimyo has only been supporting your village because of his advisors whispering in his ear of the dangers the outside world faces. The bureaucrats have allowed your village to prosper knowing that it's an asset the land cannot afford to lose. The fact is, we still need a new leader. And if that is the case, our only other choice will be to submit a plea to the courts and hope for a resolution to the crisis." Another angry nobleman said, "But the courts take even longer to decide than the Senate." Other angry nobles agreed. "We need to take action, and we have to seize it now. Our people are dying. We have to do something quickly to stop the problems we are facing. What we need to do is follow through with the vote of no confidence. We need to remove the daimyo's place of power and insert someone who is far more suited for the position. Really, Inze, you have to be the best choice here. At least, you're the only person who I think is able to do what is right for the country and by our people." Another noble backed the idea of Inze being the leader. "But we still have to worry about our other rivals. They might suggest one of their own to become the next daimyo. That Kenka would have to be their best choice. And he's just as bad as our current daimyo. We need a strong conviction and the right morals, but we may have to resort to some underhanded tactics, and if we are caught, then all the work we have done into helping the land of fire will be for naught. No one listens to liars and cheaters. Subtlety is key here. Fortunately, I know some people that might be able to help us," replied another noble, expressing her thoughts. "The trade guild won't be so willing to help us. They're like mercenaries. They work for the highest bidder. So long as money is in their pockets, they will do whatever anyone has to say, and I'm sure they will throw their lot in with our rivals should the price be right. No, we have to use the cleanest methods to bring about the results we want," another noble said. "Perhaps bribery and blackmail could help us. If our rivals resort to using those tactics, we have to be ready to meet them full force with the same tactics. We have to strike while the iron is hot. Perhaps, I have some contacts that might be willing to get their hands dirty. They have never been afraid of such a thing before, and they have always given us satisfactory results in the past. It's at least worth checking into should we find ourselves in a situation we can't claw out of. The only thing wrong with that plan is that, if the civilians find out about our deviations, they would surely throw their lot in with the side they think is right. People have always been so fickle-minded about the day-to-day machinations that they don't recognize when they're being manipulated. Our rival could use this, and will gain more power for themselves in the process. We have to be just and truthful, not resorting to any form of corruption or conspiracy. If we are to save our country, we will take the right course of action possible, the one that represents order in the time of chaos. Our ideals is what the people will resonate most with. If they wish to strive for good, they will favor the side that upholds the values of good. It's as simple as that. Otherwise, we will lose our support and end up missing our heads from our shoulders. We have to be realistic. We are going to have to accept that sometimes the best options aren't always the right ones, and that we have to get our hands dirty in order to keep balance and peace within our country and to not allow chaos or anarchy to reign." According to Inze, As he waved his hand, Inze said, "We have to move quickly and be precise, but we must also do so in an honorable and fair way so as not to stain our own morals and ideals. This is a country worth fighting and defending, and I will not let anyone hurt the things I love." This meeting is over. The nobles and diplomats left the room, leaving only Sakura behind. "It's time to end this argument, Sakura. I need your full support during this tough time," Inze said, and Sakura agreed. The woman quickly left, but the other delegates stayed. They didn't know that Inze was smarter than a snake. There is always a source of conflict, and that source was the man in the white kimono with the metal in his hands. He wasn't the real source, but he was like adding oil to a fire. His Kokorin soldiers have been helpful by collecting taxes and stirring up open rebellion against the monarchy. As a result, the daimyo has become little more than a figurehead, and when Inze takes over as daimyo, he will quickly fix that. If you didn't have the right tools to work toward your goals, you would end up right where you want to be. That's what Inze would work toward, and soon their real plan would come together. He was just waiting for the right time to strike and take what he had worked so hard for. Only then would the position be useful to him. Their real plan was about to start, so it was time for the curtains to close and open to show what the real plan was. The real reason why everything was falling into place. The notorious prison of Hazukiyo, Demon Lantern Castle, was built on a cliff with a view of a raging lake and strong winds. It was there that criminals and bad people from all over the shinobi world were locked up with their own bodies serving as cells. Hazukiyo was known for never letting a shinobi escape, which was a reputation they would rather keep. The criminals didn't know about the hidden forces at work in the castle, but the warden and one of the prisoners were already making plans in their heads. Hidden in a room, away from all social contact and rarely seeing the light of day in his small cell, was Ryu Yokazi, also known as Naruto Uzumaki. He was sitting cross-legged on the ground with his eyes closed and his hands clapped together. He had been practicing a new move all night, from the cold hours of dusk until dawn. A method that could give him freedom, but was he really looking for freedom? Or was he just making another plan or putting together the pieces of what was going to happen? Seeing an S-level criminal locked up in a maximum security prison cell would make people suspicious. He really wanted to be caught from the start so that he could carry out his plans in prison and get back something that was supposedly important to his leader. He didn't care about the object itself, but it was important enough to get Nagato's attention. Naruto didn't know what to think of this valuable object, but it helped him carry out his plans, so he would use it as best he could to make sure they stayed on track. He had many thoughts at once. One moment he was thinking about how to get away, the next about his current goals and what he would do, and the third, which confused him the most, was always about his blue-haired partner. He knew it was almost time for her to start feeling the effects of the gift he gave her, and he knew that if she was strong, she would live to see the morning sun rise. Naruto snapped his eyes open at the sound of pissed, which showed his blue orbs. A second time, he heard, pissed. He raised his head to look out the window of his cell, but not much light was coming in. Pissed, you there? Where else would I be? Naruto asked with a blank look on his face, which almost made the voice sigh. He really did have better things to do than look at a face through his window. He was planning his escape right then, and anything that got in the way of his focus could make the technique he was working on fail. And who would this be? Me, you know, I'm just a nobody. Listen, to break the seal on your chest, you have to defeat Mui. That's the only way, the voice said. Naruto didn't even raise an eyebrow at the voice. He already knew how to break the seal. It was just breaking it that was hard. How can I trust the legitimacy of your words? As Naruto said, you don't. But he could feel that presence leaving him like the wind. Now the only sounds he could hear were birds singing and the waves crashing against the cliffs. That being said, Naruto closed his eyes again and focused on his technique. There were other ways to get out of the castle or at least have some control inside it. Later, in the prison yards, where bad people and criminals wasted time living miserable lives by playing cards, rolling dice, and writing death threats to each other, Mui strutted around like he owned the place, which he did, but it didn't matter. The warden was taking one of his daily walks among the prisoners, using his presence to scare and threaten them. Some of the prisoners would guess why he did this. Maybe it was for fun, or maybe it was because he liked the smell of the ocean and the clouds in the sky. Others thought he was going on a spirit walk, which is a way to find your place in the world. This was the least likely explanation. Most people thought Mui was just reminding the criminals of their roles and enforcing his own. He was free to walk around and stretch his legs, while the people in the prison were chained like fast animals. This was the most logical explanation, and it served to remind them of what they really were. The voice said, "Hold it." Mui stopped in his tracks and turned around to see cold blue eyes staring at him from behind. The tails of a black coat were dancing in the wind. In the case of Naruto Uzumaki, Mui quickly realized that Naruto's time in isolation was over. Even a fool could see that. But what was surprising was how openly defiant many people in the prison were. They were too scared to even look Mui in the eye, let alone talk to him. "Now that you're out, have you come to tell me that you enjoyed your time in solitary confinement? Please tell me about your thoughts," Mui asked Naruto, who met her eyes with no fear in his eyes. Naruto's eyes got a little narrow as he asked, "Tell me everything you know about Tekurufu." Suddenly, the cursed seal on his left arm appeared and started pulsing, trying to hold something that had been lost. Tekurufu was once a kind, gentle and eager young boy, but yet there was something savage, something contained within him. Tekurufu, if he ever submitted to that bloodlust, became his own worst enemy. Even if all he did was for his village, he would always remain as that kind child. "I refuse to say anymore," said Mui. "But what does this have to do with me?" Naruto said, "You're just a piece of the puzzle I need to finish in order to solve the mysteries that are bothering me." With each word, Mui took another step toward him. All of the prisoners in the crowd were confused about what was going on. They couldn't make sense of what they were saying. One prisoner with a striped green bandana and beautiful eyes was watching the whole thing with eyes that wouldn't blink. "I would reconsider trying to complete the puzzle. As you say, there are things that we do in our lives that we would rather forget. Besides, if you scratch at that wall too much, you may find it crashing down on you. And in your present condition, it would not be wise to keep scratching at that wall." Mui continued, his eyes narrowing more at the brunette. "Even if my mind is crushed by this falling wall, if I can get back up, then it won't be a problem," the blonde said. Mui asked, "Tell me, what is your village to you?" This made Naruto raise an eyebrow. "Have you ever killed someone you had no grudge against in order to protect your village?" Naruto replied, "So you mean to say that I'm not very useful to any village as long as I kill the people they call their enemies or who they see as a threat to their peace?" Mui nodded his head. "I've never heard of anything so stupid before. Eventually you will understand that you don't matter to anyone. Even if you were to stand before the gates of hell for your village, they wouldn't care less. If your village celebrates the death of a 13-year-old boy, then they couldn't care less about the one who actually killed him so long as the danger is eradicated." According to Mui. "But the thing is, that boy wasn't a danger to begin with." Mui replied, "Very true." Suddenly, 3 guards appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Naruto by the shoulders. One of the guards grabbed Naruto and said, "'Cause you caused trouble when you got out, we'll put you in your own cell to teach you some manners." Mui then raised his hand and stopped them. "Separate him from everyone else, that's the only way he'll learn to respect you," Mui said as the guards took him back to the same cell. "Well, Blondie, I guess you liked your time in solitary because you're going back there right now," the guard said as Naruto let them take him. "Second offense 5 days, let's see how feisty you are after that." Naruto was in solitary confinement when Mui spoke to him. He pulled up his sleeve and bit his arm, drawing blood and clapping his hands together. He was focused on mastering the same technique, but Mui's words kept going through his mind like bells, as if he had heard them before. Naruto thought to himself, how come those words sound so familiar? As he sat in his cell and looked up through his window at the last rays of sunlight leaving the sky. He frowned slightly because he knew it was time and could only hope that she would be okay. "It's time, be safe. Konan." A few hours later, in a dark forest with light and dark clouds above, heavy rain was hitting the tree leaves and branches and wetting the ground. The winds were howling and the trees' trunks were being scraped against, making a symphony with the leaves. While the full moon was shining over the sky, it gave the white clouds a light blue tint. The last rays of sunlight also cast a bronze tint on the clouds and sky. The birds were running away from the trees because they were afraid for their lives because they could hear a painful whimpering sound like an animal that was hurt. The Akatsuki member Konan was lying on the ground on her side with her arms up to her chest as if cradling her form. The rain was hitting her bare body, and she had a painful look on her face as she ground her teeth and tears were forming in the corner of her eyes. She was in pain like she had never felt before, and there were black, smoking cracks all over her body that not even the raindrops could cover. She tried to hide her screams of pain as they came closer, but her naked body was shaking with pain. Her clothes were all over her, and for a while, anything that touched her skin burned. She felt suffocated, like she was locked up in a cell. Whenever she tried to look up at the sky, the rain hit her face hard. Immediately, her face scrunched up in pain as another wave of pain went through her body. She curled her toes, brought her legs up to her chest, and rubbed her shoulders to try to ease the pain. As the pain got worse, the cracks on her body started to spread out more. The question that everyone who didn't know would have had was how this could have happened to her. Not long after that, she felt someone behind her. A swirling shape that moved through the air before a body appeared. The man's whole upper half of his head was covered by a white mask with a purple tint. The mask's design looked like a mix of the Sharingan and the Rinnegan, with a ripple pattern and 3 tomo in the middle, 2 of which are eye holes. He wore black pants, gloves, and a white shirt underneath. On top of that, he wore a purple mantle with a high collar and long sleeves that split down the middle and had the Uchiha clan symbol on the back. He also wore a simple light purple obi and a belt with a big gunbai on his back. As Obito walked up to Konan with a smirk hidden behind his mask, she turned her back on him and he could see all the black, smoldering cracks on her body. He knew whose work they were because the way things were going, Konan might not live to see the sunrise in the morning. Obito lied when he said, "A wounded flower dying under the moon." Really, Konan, I have never seen you in such a state before. It's truly heartbreaking. What he really said wasn't true. Instead of responding, Konan curled her body up even more, most likely to shield herself from what he said. Konan hissed, "I knew you would come." She could barely draw out those words because she was in so much pain that she couldn't do anything but coil up. "Ah yes. In fact, I believe I came to check on your progress. You know, tasks and chores, they are tedious things after all, but you know how it is, we just have to go ahead and do it so to get it over with. But the thing is, how can we expect it to pull our own weight when it's our own underlings who are incapable of such things themselves? It's really a mind-boggling thing," said Obito as he stood before the naked Konan but couldn't see her features. "Now then, will you kill Naruto Uzumaki or won't you kill Naruto Uzumaki? Simple answer, yes or no." Konan looked over her shoulder and said, "Go to hell." His amber eyes locked with hers. Obito told him, "Please, my dear, I'm already there." But still. It's a simple thing, jab a kunai into his neck, not that hard, but the baffling thing about it is why not? You have much to gain from his death. With him out of the way you can finally realize Yahiko's dreams and bring them into reality. I truly cannot comprehend the fickle nature of the human heart. No. No, please tell me you haven't developed feelings for him. That's truly laughable since he has none. Why have affections for something that has the emotional level of a vegetable? There. Not gone. Just buried. There is still good in him. It's trapped in a dark hollow. Whether he created that hollow doesn't matter. He's not afraid of love. He's afraid of being loved. But my affections for him are still uncertain. But there is one thing. I will protect him from you," Konan said as she screamed more in agony. "Admirable. But what if you fail? His mind is fragile after all. The moment he comes to know love, he will run the risk of carrying even more hatred for the world around him, maybe even hatred for you. He's already lost someone he loved, someone he cherished more than anything. That love transformed into hatred for the ones that took her away from him. He held hatred for anyone even associated with her. He despised everything around him or even reminded him of her, and he became more of a danger than an asset. He was more like a volatile animal, calm and kind, to savage and cruel. Can you shoulder the hatred he holds for his home, the people that wronged him, the ones that denied him everything? Your words are meaningless unless you take action. The only mercy anyone can give to a sick animal is death. Will you give that to him?" Obito saw Konan's resolve and will when she said, "No." He scowled behind his mask and then disappeared in a swirling blur, possibly leaving Konan to die in the forest. In another place outside of Konoha, dark clouds hung over the burned out village. 2 people were hiding behind bushes. One was staring out at the gates of the strongest village, and the other was staring at nothing in particular. "You live in a nice neighborhood. You know, I felt someone get mugged right outside your house. It was fascinating," the girl said. The person was a girl, and they were wearing a full bodysuit with dark gray square shaped patterns on their arms and chest. Silver leather armor covered their torso, going down to their legs and back, and was held together by bands on their sides and a ringed band around their neck. They were also wearing long boots with white lines that went up to their waist and were held together by two bands around their waist, and black gloves that went from the thigh. Her skin was also very pale, and her eyes were milky white. She wore a star-shaped hair clip. That person ducked his head into the bushes to avoid being seen by the guards at the gate and said, "Someone jumped outside my house, and you find that interesting?" Well, there are less interesting things, like dirt. He had brown eyes, light skin, and fiery red hair that was pulled back into a high ponytail with a noticeable widow's peak. He had tribal tattoos all over his upper body and on his forehead, which was covered with a maroon bandana. He was wearing a black kimono with light blue trim and an obi, ninja sandals, and a katana around his waist. Kiyoko, the girl's name, said, "It doesn't happen very often, so it's interesting." She was sitting on the ground with her partner looking over his shoulder over and over again. "I can feel those guards from here, at the gate. Why do they feel so grim? What do you suppose will happen if I tickled one of them?" She asked her partner, whose name was Eugen, "What does tickling them matter?" "That would be funny." Kiyoko asked, "Just trying to lighten the mood and it worked, so you know what you have to do." She never even turned her head to look at Eugen because she wasn't seeing anyone, so she didn't have to. Eugen looked over at the gate of Konoha again and said, Yeah, find Naruto's journal, bring it back, find the Maebor, live happily ever after, the end." Kiyoko told Eugen, "You're missing something." She looked at him, and he saw a fist going straight for his face. It hit him in the nose, and he fell to the ground face first. His eyes were wide and white, and he held up a bloody nose. He then turned around and looked at Kiyoko, who was now facing away. He was going to ask the obvious question, she could tell. "Have to make it realistic, you were mugged just now, act like you're in pain." "I am in pain. Someone is good. Looking as me shouldn't be in pain," Eugen deadpanned as he glared at the blind girl. She just shrugged her shoulders. She clapped and said, "Well, chop chop, off you go." He got up and stumbled out of the bushes onto the road, falling over because his nose was broken. The guards at the gate saw that Eugen was hurt. One of the guards asked, "Are you okay, sir?" The redhead then realized that he had forgotten his lie about stumbling to the gate. He would have to make do with what he had. "A bee stung me. I think it's starting to swell. Oh my god, am I going to die?" Eugen asked as he grabbed his wrist. "If you were stung by a bee, why's your nose bleeding?" "It's an allergic reaction. The sting is getting bigger, it's almost as big as my head." "Don't just stand there, do something," yelled Eugen as he fell to his knees. The two guards looked at each other funny, and Kiyoko slapped her face when she heard Eugen scream. "Just tell my wife, my children. I died at Konoha." One of the guards told Eugen, "Shut up, we have enough drama as it is. Just go into the village." She walked into the village with a smug grin on her face and gave Kiyoko a thumbs up even though she couldn't see. She couldn't join because of the sensory barrier around the village. Anyone who walked through the barrier had their chakra recorded, and the barrier was updated often, so they probably already knew Kyoko's chakra signature and would punish her if she went into the village. But Eugen had never been to Konoha, so the sensor barrier wouldn't have been able to let the village know about the invasion. He was also a pretty normal person, nothing too unusual about him. He could see both sad and happy faces on the people in the village as he walked through it. He thought that with the weather the way it was, the people would be more downcast, but I guess he was wrong. But he had to keep his mind on the task at hand, he had to find Naruto's journal. He thought it might have been at the blonde's old house, but that would be too easy to find. Or maybe it was in one of the village's famous landmarks, but that would be too obvious. Eugen knew Naruto would have hidden his journal somewhere that no one would think to look, somewhere that many people saw but didn't look. When he looked up at the Hokage mountain, it was like a light went off in his head. He knew he had found the answer. As Eugen jumped across the village to get to the mountain, he knew this was just a guess. The journal might not have been there, or it might have been. Getting off the ground on a building, he looked out over the Hokage mountain and saw all 5 faces of the current and past Hokages. Then he put out his hand and pointed at the Shoden Hokage's face. Every time Eugen spoke, he pointed his finger at a different face of the Hokage until it landed on the face of the Naruto Hokage. He said, "Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by the toe, if he squeals, let him go, eeny, meeny miny, mo." Yujin jumped up and used his chakra to cling to the face of the famous Senju stone carving. He then clicked his finger and stooped down to the carving's nose, where he put his hand up the Hokage's nose. He laughed a little at how silly it was, but all he could feel was rock at first. Then he felt something strange. He pulled out the object and, with a smug grin on his face, saw that it was a book. The cover had vertical lines going down it in a circle at the bottom, with a Japanese tree on a cliff over the lines and holding it all together with string. Huh, it looks like smart people think alike. Okay, that sounds a little dirty. But Chan did say I was the smartest person in the world, so I guess Yujin Uzumaki is smarter than she thought. Yujin, who was one of the few Uzumaki clan members still alive, said to himself. Now to just make sure this is his. He should have his name on it somewhere. On the first page of the book, there was a sketch of a big tree, and under it, there was Naruto's signature, which said, "Number 1 Hokage candidate Naruto," in big, bold letters. There was also a swirl next to his name. So Yujin knew for sure that this was Naruto's journal, and with it, he and Kiyoko could figure out where the Maibor was. But because he was interested, Yujin turned the page and read the first entry. There were also rough drawings of the Yondaime, a beautiful woman, the Sandaime Hokage, and many other people. He wrote down the date as he read the first few paragraphs. August 8th. I haven't been able to focus for weeks. I have new ideas, there are reports of insurgents, and Root is always watching me. How can I not be distracted? The last few months have been spent setting up the new lab. I have doubts. I keep asking myself if this is the best thing to do. How did I take part in this? Toge's report on the outposts definitely brought me here, but that doesn't even begin to tell the story. I'll explain my thoughts on this more when I have a moment to breathe. On my last trip from the main base, I found this journal in a cute little shop that served good green tea but didn't want to sell me anything. Writing everything down helps me get it out of my head. As I start this project, which I've wanted, been inspired by, and dreaded at the same time, I need a place to write down my personal thoughts and the most private research notes. The Zensho is the sum of all of those things, so it makes sense that this journal starts here. Am I a little emotional? Yes. Am I practical? Yes. When Yujin turned the page, he saw a drawing of Naruto at the age the passage was written, along with the next part of the passage. Even though Koa is my artificially enhanced data recording and storage system and assistant, I learned a long time ago that I can get back anything I put into Koa. Some people in this organization wouldn't think twice about using the intrusion fuinjutsu I helped create against me if it served their own purposes. As the saying goes, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. It's no secret that the other kids look at me funny because they know what I am. But they don't allow themselves to get past that flaw. There is one kid with white hair who is different. Some people don't get it. We're soldiers because Root made us that way. We can't go in a different direction or become anything other than what we are now. But we can choose within that role. We can accept it and do well, or we can refuse it and die. Duty is clear and defined. We only lose a weakness if they die, which makes us stronger. We make it through, and we live. I will too. So I start to learn if people can be saved from themselves and what part one will play in their uncertain future. Will I be able to keep it inside? Interesting information. I can only imagine that there's a huge market for the homes of small little soldier killers, Yujin said. That's why Naruto wrote the passage in his journal while he was making the Zensho. Well, it's time to go back to Kiyoko. She'll be jumping with joy, or she managed to bake a poison cake, that's how she spends her time. I'll just have some tea, Yujin said as she left the village with Naruto. When he got back to Kiyoko, she smiled, happy that he was safe. There was a palace in the capital city of the Land of Fire that looked out over the whole city like a god made of stone and wood. The daimyo lived in that palace and held meetings between delegates, nobles, politicians, and bureaucrats, but not very often. The daimyo himself didn't like these meetings and thought they were a waste of time because he could be out having fun with the common people. The daimyo, in all his wonderful glory and wisdom, had to go to another one of these annoying meetings between politicians. Someone who had never had to work or pick up a pencil would be completely bored, and he'd much rather read the latest manga that had been released in parts. The chair recognizes the representative from the town of Konoha and the representative from the northern part of the Land of Fire. Sakura Haruno and Inze Hosoku, the daimyo said from the head of the Land of Fire, where he was sitting in front of a round table with chairs all around it and lights hanging from above. On either side of the daimyo were 2 royal guards sworn to protect the man of royal rank. With that, Inze and Sakura got up from their chairs and showed themselves to the rest of the courts. Deputies from the Land of Fire, daimyo. Sama. There has been a tragedy in our great country. Inze pointed one of his metal clasped hands at his rival Kenka, which began right here with the taxation of trade routes, the wastefulness of the aristocracy, the denial of equal rights to citizens, and the economic chaos that almost led to revolution and engulfed our whole country because of men like him, Kenka said, sweating a little as the gesture of power caught everyone's attention. This is crazy, and you have no proof. I disagree with what the senator said, rebuked Kenka, trying to hide his mistake and calm the crowd down. The daimyo tried to calm things down by saying, the chair does not recognize the senator of the western region of the Land of Fire at this time. He did this because fights and scandals were about to break out. In order to make our claims, I present Sakura Haruno, newly elected delegate of Konoha who speaks for them, Inze said as he sat down. He then let Sakura take the stage, where she blushed a little because everyone was looking at her. Representatives of the Land of Fire, please stand up. As I come to talk to you, things are in the worst possible state. Poverty and famine are attacking our people and our economy without our knowledge. I'm sorry, but I had to stop talking when Inze's rival spoke up to complain. Kenka said, I reject this. She doesn't have much of a say in court matters. Sakura and Inze stared at him, and he seemed to shrink a little in fear. This is unbelievable. I suggest that a commission be sent among the common folk to find out the truth of this matter. The voice of the South concurs with the voice of the West with the Honorable Delegate Kenka. A commission would be the most sensible course of action to discover the roots of the problems plaguing us. The daimyo said, this commission sounds like a great idea. The point is conceded. The delegates of the North and East, along with the delegate of Konoha, will you differ to allow a commission to look into the validity of your accusations and claims? This made people who supported Inze look down their noses. It was Inze who whispered to Sakura, this is where the daimyo's strength fades and will disappear into the forgotten ravages of history. Sakura just looked sad. I won't change my mind. I came to talk to you about how to solve the problem with our sovereignty right now. People didn't vote for me to sit in a committee and watch our people suffer, starve, and die while you talk about the problems at hand. I wasn't elected to be someone else's puppet while others abuse their power to further their own goals and interests. I didn't get elected to see everything we love and care about fall apart around us like a house of cards or a tower of glass. Most of the people in the room looked at Sakura with interest, and some looked at her with respect for how strong she was. I move for a vote of no confidence in our daimyo's leadership, she said. For a few seconds, there was silence and shocked faces as people took in what had just happened. For the first time in his reign, the daimyo actually lifted his HEA. Not long after, several court members were practically yelling to vote. At least 2/3 of the court were calling for the removal of the daimyo and the installation of a new ruler and royal family. The daimyo just bowed his head in defeat as everyone turned against the leader they had sworn to serve. Soon, chaos had set in, and papers and shoes were flying everywhere. They will now choose a new daimyo. Inze told Sakura, a strong daimyo who will not let this tragedy continue. Sakura just sat back in her chair and looked confused about what she had just done. Naruto had been locked up alone for 5 days and was still sitting in the same way he had when he first got there, with his legs crossed and his hands together in the middle. He had closed his eyes and was focused, and his body was solid and still like a mountain. Hearing the door to his cell open, the blonde saw a guard come in and tell him that his time in solitary was over. The guard then led Naruto out of the cell without any complaints, and Naruto did what he was told and went to join his other prisoners. Later, it was lunchtime. When Naruto walked into the area where the prisoners were eating, they were all busy munching on the average food that was there. The blonde's blue eyes scanned the room, landing on each prisoner. Some were huge, almost too big to be human. Others were really skinny from not getting enough exercise, and others looked like they were having a good time, almost like they wanted to be in prison. Naruto could tell that these prisoners were not happy. But with each step he took, the room got quieter and more people looked at him. He didn't care that they were looking at him. He kept walking. One of the prisoners was eating ramen noodles, which made Naruto slightly thankful that they served ramen. But he didn't mind the sharp tension in the air and the way it was leaving his body with each breath. All those eyes were staring at him. The blonde then went up to the chef and asked for a bowl of ramen noodles. He sat in a corner of the room by himself, away from the other prisoners, and slowly ate all the noodles. Soon, something came into his vision, and he saw a Kumo shinobi sitting in front of him, smiling. Naruto knew that man's chakra was that of the person who took his clone, but he didn't care about anything else. They tried to start a conversation when Moroi said, "Hey." Naruto said, "Go away, you're not my type." He didn't seem interested at all, and he kept slurping on his noodles in peace, which was broken by the criminal in front of him. "Hello, my name is Moroi. You should know that you've become quite famous around here," Moroi said to get the blonde's attention. But Naruto didn't pay any attention to him because he was too busy enjoying his lunch, which was much better than the junk they served at the castle. "I didn't really do much." "I don't understand why they would care," Naruto said when he wasn't eating noodles. "You tried to get away the first chance you got, even on your first day. You were put in solitary twice and even stood up to Mui, that takes guts. The people here have more hope and morale because of everything you've done. Some have even gotten a boost to their egos." Moroi told Naruto about how his presence has affected the prisoners. "You tried to shape your chakra even though you couldn't, but you failed. You wouldn't have a chance against Mui, the big man. You fought with words instead of fists, and words can be powerful. Not many guys would do that." Naruto sighed and tried to figure out what was going through the prisoners' minds by saying, "I didn't do it for them. I was just being selfish. Hey man, Mui's jutsu has made us forget that we're shinobi. Just look around you, these guys are like sheep. Nothing ever gets tense around here. It's so peaceful." Just as Moroi was about to say something else, Naruto's half-eaten bowl of ramen fell to the floor during the hand slam. The prisoner said, "Heard you're some kind of big shot, S. Ranked shinobi with no equal. Like to put that to the test." When Naruto looked up, he saw a man with a mohawk who didn't seem to be any different from the others. Naruto stared at the table and said, "Well, you must be smart enough to form a sentence and know who you're talking to, or someone set you up to do it." The man, however, just grabbed Naruto's shoulder in a threatening way, which made the situation very clear. The man with the sick grin said, "You have a smart mouth. I bet that mouth of yours can be used for other things." Naruto warned, "Take your hand off of me, or you might lose it." The man didn't seem scared, though, and just smiled as he tightened his grip on Naruto's shoulder. He was then quickly thrown over Naruto's shoulder and slammed into the table, where he grunted in pain. Naruto quickly grabbed his arm with both hands and snapped the arm that was holding onto his shoulder, making him scream in pain and the corners of his eyes tear up. He was then elbowed in the face and thrown off the table, his face bleeding and his arm bending in an odd way. Someone in the prison watched what happened and said, "That guy's a monster." He was horrified by what he saw and how violent it was. He probably could even hear the bones breaking. "Don't bother, that guy who's bleeding did something wrong. Trust me, Yokaze is worth a lot more than that scum any day," Moroi said. He wasn't surprised by what had happened because he had heard all about Ryu Yokaze and how vicious he was in battle. Another prisoner, mostly dressed in green and with white hair, was also watching and listening. It was safe to say that she had seen just as scary things before. Around that time, the guards started rounding up the prisoners. They also found that the man Naruto had almost mauled had died from his injuries, but no one seemed to care. He always said he would leave Hazukiyo, and it looks like he got his wish because the guards were now carrying a body bag. Another guard was coming around a corner when he felt Naruto lightly tap him on the neck, knocking him out. Naruto then took off his uniform, and the guard got dressed and walked out of the castle, heading for the cliffs. Now he was standing on the cliffs, with the raging ocean below him and the winds rubbing against his body and making his black cloak flap around like it had a life of its own. A storm was coming, with lightning crackling in the clouds and rain pounding against the ocean, making what he heard sound like a natural symphony. He didn't want to run away or leave. He just wanted to find comfort in the always stormy world he lived in and shared with. "Don't jump in there. You'll die," yelled a voice, and Naruto turned his head to see the same prisoner he had talked to while they were being questioned. Like him, she was standing a little away from the edge of the cliff, stiff and still. Naruto looked out over the lake in the slowly building storm. "I didn't come here to escape prison. I came here to escape from everything," he said. The woman just raised an eyebrow at him. She didn't expect that answer from someone like him. She thought he liked being free and not being bothered by anything the world or its people had to offer. The woman said, "You came to escape the cruelty of this world." Naruto just stared at her, which answered her question. We should find shelter, the storm is coming soon, he said. Naruto and the woman were both protected from the storm by a small cave with a big campfire. Naruto just stared into the flames and watched their flickering, dancing shapes light up the darkness. Sometimes he wondered if flames and fire were the most beautiful things in the world, because even though they destroyed everything they touched, the land and everything else would be renewed and creation would follow in their wake. You fit in pretty well at the prison. Everyone looks up to and fears you, and Mui is very interested in you. But you were also lucky. Those cliffs have been eroding for years, and it was only a matter of time before they fell. You could have fallen into the water and not been able to get out. Do you remember what I told you in the holding cells? The woman asked as she added more wood to the fire. Yes, I understand what you meant then and now. I've been careful, but I can't say the same for the other prisoners, Naruto said as he took off his black cloak. His chiseled chest could be seen, and the fire could warm the dark parts of his body. The woman noticed the lightning. Like scar on his left pectoral, but she didn't do anything else about it. You're smart because you think about what you do before you do it. Why do you get into trouble? So you can be locked up somewhere safe where no one can get to you. This is something you do for another reason that I don't understand. It's no surprise that most people respect you. The woman said it with a little awe in her voice. Other than that, she gave credit where credit was due. You are an Anbu level shinobi, and your skills and behavior make you stand out. You're quiet, private, and don't interact with other people. The mission is everything to you, but you have your own morals, and when things get tough, you'll do what's right even if you know it's wrong. You were born and raised in Kusagakure. Something tragic happened in your life, which is why you're so cut off from other people. You were hurt, and by making connections, you're afraid of hurting others, Naruto said. The woman nodded because most of what he said was true, and there was no point in lying because he could tell when people were. Hi, my name is Rayu Zetsu, and yes, I'm from the Kusagakure Anbu. You and I have both done research on each other. Even though there isn't much to learn about you, Ryu Yokazi. You're a ghost with no personal history, no family ties, no work history, no medical history, and a name you may have chosen to hide from others. Ryu Yokazi, this woman, now known as Rayu Zetsu, said. You're an Akatsuki agent with high skills and possible Uchiha clan roots. Other than that, you're a ghost. Naruto was surprised that she could guess so much. She was wrong on a few points, but that didn't bother her. Naruto said, well. Informed, I like that trait. You know what you're getting into before you jump in. Rayu Zetsu nodded and asked, but why do you still want my help? I can tell this isn't a friendly call. You want me to help you fight Mui. That's right, Mui is a Jonin from Kusagakure. He comes from a clan of gatekeepers and guardians, whose job it is to watch the gate. And of course, beyond the gate is the reason you're here, the Gokuraku no Hako, or Box of Ultimate Bliss. According to legend, anyone who can open it will get their wish come true. Naruto nodded. I don't think a simple box can give you anything you want. It must be a trick, Naruto said as he looked at the fire. No one is sure if it's true or not. But the story goes that during the time of the Sage of the Six Paths, a group of people almost took over the world with that box, Rayu Zetsu said, making Naruto raise an eyebrow at how old the box was. Naruto tried to figure out the truth by saying, something must have happened that kept them from carrying out all of their plans. That's where the story ends. No one knows why. But they say that half of the world was destroyed and is still having a hard time getting back together. Two rival groups grew out of the people who survived the group that manipulated the box, and they have been at odds with each other ever since. The flower group wants to use the box to fight and take over other countries, but my group, the grass fruit group, wants peace. Because he is part of the flower, Mui can use the box as a weapon. The information we were given says that it takes a huge amount of chakra to open the box. That's why they want to use you. Your chakra is so strong and at such huge levels. Rayu Zetsu told Naruto they had to change their plans because you showed up, and they're moving quickly. Naruto agreed, noticing strange movement among the guards and prisoners. And my mission is to stop the flower faction from opening the box, no matter what. Even though he knew she couldn't kill him, Naruto said, maybe it will be the right thing to do to kill me and stop them from reaching their goals. Rayu Zetsu growled at the fire, if I kill someone to get what I want, then I will become what I'm fighting against. Naruto replied, he being Mui. Rayu Zetsu then gave him a nod. Mui is ready to give up his own son to open the box. He doesn't care what it takes. We must break Mui's jutsu in order to escape, Rayu Zetsu whispered as she stared into the fire with unbridled anger and hatred. Killing Mui is the only way to complete my mission and get my revenge. I will paint my hands in his blood. The seal on our bodies can't be broken until Mui is killed. Until then, we have no power. Use your great strength to break the box when Mui dies. As Naruto told Rayu Zetsu straight out, you know I have orders to steal the box. This made Rayu Zetsu turn away from the fire and stare at him with wide eyes filled with fear and shock. But if you say this box is as dangerous as it sounds, I'll go with you for now, he added. We don't even have to kill Mui for that to happen. Just tell me what you mean. Rayu Zetsu said with a little more anger. Naruto then raised a finger where chakra could be seen. If someone had a lot of chakra, they could shape some of it. Naruto then pressed his finger into the hard, stony ground, and Rayu Zetsu saw an image form in the rock. It was a man screaming with his arm in the air, crosses for eyes, and an eye in the middle of his chest with arrows pointing around his body. We can't add chakra to ourselves from the inside. That wouldn't work for chakra we get from the outside. Once this jutsu works, I'll be able to enter a certain form for a certain amount of time. You know what's great? This jutsu will help me stay in control. All I need to do is concentrate and focus. Then our missions will be over, Naruto said. Rayu Zetsu nodded and was a little interested in this new form of his. Well, we should go back to Hazukiyo before the guards find out we're not there, Rayu Zetsu said as they put out the fire and packed up their things. As Naruto lay in his cell, he thought about what had happened that day and how familiar Mui's words sounded. He then thought about his time in Konoha and everything that had happened there. But he felt like some things were missing, like all the smiles and laughs he had with his friends, all the fights and missions, and all the people he cared about and loved. But the only two people who came to his mind were. After that, he went to sleep as the full moon went down behind the dark clouds carrying thunder and lightning.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.